Okay, we'll call the meeting of the City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Johnston.
And here?
Mayor Pro Tem Haney.
Here.
Councilmember Blatz.
Here.
Councilmember Francina. Here. Councilmember Wyrick.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Will we all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Randy, will you lead us?
Ready? Begin? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first order of business to approve the agenda. I would like to pull item G, but are there any other items that anyone wants to pull off consent?
Mayor Johnson,
Mr.
I'd
Mayor.
like to pull F.
Mr. Mayor, the first consent item has to do with the redevelopment agency, so I think we have to convene as the redevelopment agency as well. But the first consent calendar has to do with the redevelopment agency.
So pull all three of those?
Yeah, the redevelopment item does need to be taken separately.
Okay, so if the clerk will make note of that, we're pulling, now when it says, okay, item number 1. Okay, waiver. How was that shown? That's shown as a separate meeting. Right?
Yeah, it is. I think when you called the meeting to order, Mr. Mayor, we probably have to call it as a city council and the city council acting as the redevelopment agency.
Okay, I thought we were
Yeah,
gonna
that's
do-
correct.
Okay, we're not going to adjourn to it. Is that correct? So I just need to reword that for the record?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, will the city attorney reword it in the way he would like to see it in the record?
Let the record reflect that the mayor has called both the city council and the Ojai Redevelopment Agency successor agency board to session.
Okay, and do we need a roll call for the agency, or are we satisfied that? Okay.
I'll defer to the city attorney. Are we?
The roll call is sufficient because the members are the same.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we are pulling F, G, and Paul, the one that you mentioned, or was that the one?
Well,
we
what
did?
I would suggest is I'll move to approve the consent calendar on the Ojai Redevelopment Agency successor agency agenda.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. Any objection to that?
Okay.
So ordered. Okay, so
On one, if I may, Mr. Mayor, because that's a pair of resolutions, for that one, we would appreciate a roll call vote.
okay. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Pro Tem Haney.
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz.
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Yes.
Councilmember Francina.
Yes.
Mayor Johnston.
Yes. Okay, so,
Thank you. And that, for the record, is a motion from both bodies to approve both resolutions as stated in their respective staff report relating to 334 East Ojai Avenue. Thank you.
okay, and so we've approved the agenda, recognizing we're going to pull F and J off of the consent agenda, okay?
F and G.
If there's no objection to that, then the agenda stands approved, and now we have some presentations to make and some thank yous to give to people for long service to the community. So is Brian out there? Come on up and I'll come around and join you.
Hey. Did you bring the paperwork? Oh, there we go. Not me. Not me.
I thought that was part of the ceremony.
Yeah, I thought, nice, a little music in the background. Sounded like harp music. Wouldn't that be nice?
We're gonna do.
I think when we call this meeting to order, there should be a little music, like bagpipes or something.
Well, the mayor's getting the awards and the information. I'm sure he joins me, or I join him in thanking all of those who have showed up for the Historic Preservation Commission awards tonight. Your attendance is amazing for some very fabulous folks. Okay, Mayor Johnson has asked me as the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission to read a brief bio that was prepared. Twice, being recognized for the 2018 Historic Preservation Award is Twice Sold Tales. also known as Ojai Valley Library Friends and Foundation, OVLFF, is eligible for the City of Ojai Historic Preservation Award based on criteria number 1, which is for preservation of historic resources through conservation and/or restoration of a historic building or site, and criteria number 5 is for design and planning efforts to preserve historic properties. They're being recognized for the recreation of the Maravilla Improvement Company, also known as the Arbolada Land Office and the Ojai Valley Company Office, which is the City of Ojai's landmark number 21, Twice Sold Tales bookstore. Our thanks to this diligent group in working with the City of Ojai Commissions, Public Works, and Council in bringing this part of the Ojai downtown history back. At this time, we'd like to bring up John Lambert and Judy Oberlander. Judy is the president of the OVLFF.
John. Yeah. And this particular award is being given out not only for the contribution to the community, but for the tenacity and endurance of the committee to get through all of the city regulations and reviews. The plaque for the City of Ojai presented in 2018 Preservation Award for the Twice Sold Tales. Significant and outstanding contributions to the preservation of the Ojai cultural, historical, and architectural heritage. Thank you very much for all that you've done and for what a great facility. It's not only the bookstore and the wonderful facade on it, but to have recreated or have created an actual conference room that is a resource to the community that many people benefit from. So, thank you.
We thank the City Council, the Historic Preservation Commission for this singular honor. The Twice Sold Tales bookstore was organized in the library itself very quickly after the Friends itself started as an organization in, I believe it was 1996, 95. It started selling used books to support the activities of the library in that very small room next to where the desks are when you walk into the library. It expanded into the building next door, which was purchased by the Friends as part of an overall plan to expand the library, to rebuild the library. That unfortunately did not come about, and so the Friends ended up as owning a piece of property in Ojai, much to our surprise. So it became the Friends Twice Sold Tales bookstore. It has operated there since the very early part of this new century of ours. And at one point, we realized that, one, it didn't meet the earthquake regulations, and secondly, the termites were having a field day. So this brought about the need to rebuild it. We originally thought it would be a very modest rebuild. Instead, it turned into quite an operation. At the same time, we recognized, as being part of Ojai and being part of the libraries of the Ojai Valley, that we had an obligation because of the historic nature of this building. We did our best with our architects to maintain what we could of the building, but unfortunately, a good part of it was built on the ground with no foundation, and therefore really could not be saved. So as we rebuilt it, we made the decision to rebuild the pergola in the front, to try to restore it to the pictures that we were able to unearth with the museum, so that it looks like it did in the 1930s. We're very happy to have succeeded in that. We're very happy that the Twice Sold Tales bookstore is an integral part of the fabric of our community at this point in time, and we're delighted that it brings in enough funds for us to make significant contributions to what the libraries of our valley do. The Ojai City Library, the Miners Oaks Library, and the Oakview Library. The Friends exist to support public libraries. And we're very happy that we're still here and doing it. So thank you so much to the city for recognizing us and this wonderful building.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, John. Okay, at this time, then, I would like our other 2018 Historic Preservation Award recipient, Dawn Teeting, to come up. And with her, I'd like Julie Tumamite Stensley, if she would join her in coming up. I do want to make one special mention. As many of you know, Don and I were very close to David through the many years that we knew him. We both individually thought that David should join us tonight for this presentation and the one to Terry. So if you knew David, you knew for the last year, he wore this armband. So I always bring him with me when I come to an important meeting. I told Dawn, and she whipped out all the David jewelry that she has on tonight. So, just to let David know you're here. Historic Preservation Award, Dawn Teeting is eligible for the City of Ojai Historic Preservation Award based on criteria number 2, protection of historic or prehistoric archaeological sites, and number 6, grassroots organizational efforts in historic preservation. Dawn Teeting was instrumental in the process of the City Council adoption of the preliminary archaeological assessment resolution. She also participated with others in the production of an educational brochure about cultural resources that was funded by a small grant from the Society for California Archaeology. She often speaks for historic preservation and the landmarking of historical structures at city meetings. Thank you, Dawn, for your service.
Thank you. And Judy, come on up. Julie, come on up here and join us.
If you'd like to say something.
I would just like to, first of all, thank the community for all of their support. I know there were a lot of people behind the scenes who submitted comments, public comments, who spoke out at meetings, and we would not be here where we are today without all of that support. I'd also like to thank the tribe, Julie Tumamite Stensley, Pat Tumamite, and others from the tribe who supported the efforts and really were the backbone of the preservation efforts and bringing their culture, continuing their culture here in Ojai. And also to the committee members. Many long, arduous hours were put in, and we found a workable solution. And I would like to thank the council also for their support in protecting Ojai's past. So thank you, I'm honored.
We are honored. People find their way to Ojai in many different ways, and some have a bigger picture. When I met Dawn, which was through a very, hard time that we were facing, and she came here to teach all of us. She came here to open all of our minds of processes of when we talk about perseverance and endurance. We really were challenged. But we needed someone of her caliber, someone of her spirit, someone who decided that Ojai was calling her and that there was something here for her. Little did she know that it was a call from an ancient ones and that we needed her. So, with that, the character in which Dawn instills in herself and her soul, little did I know it, I'd find a spirit sister and a kindred spirit in her. So she has taught us all a great deal of what the word preservation means, that it comes from your soul. If you don't feel it in your soul, you can't understand what it means to preserve something. When it's under your feet, I think the biggest lesson that she's hopefully taught a lot of people is that you have to understand that preservation of historic anything or prehistoric isn't always visible until it's destroyed. And then you step back and go, oh, wait, why didn't we do this or that? So we worked very, very hard, all of us, the committee, the staff, our ad hoc, Severo, who's no longer here on the council. I want to recognize him too, our tribal members who came and supported us in this long journey of education and what it means to have a place like Ojai and understand the energy that is here in this place. So we thank you. We thank you for all your hard work. We could not have done it without you. So we thank you and we love you.
Thank you, Don, and I can also bear witness to the integral part that you played in this entire effort, the tenacity, the relentlessness of which you kept making it clear to people that just words in a planning document don't get it done. Particularly when there are only a few words, then people want to interpret them in many different ways. So between your work and Julie's work and the work of the committee, that was a very difficult task you undertook, and I commend you for your success and thank you for coming back. So why don't you come on, Julie?
I spent 3 years on that freaking committee. I know, it's okay.
I'll say something.
No.
Coordinating outfits.
Yeah, see?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Okay, at this time, we would like to bring up our second time we've awarded this. First recipient of this award was, of course, our dear friend David Mason. He would be honored and thrilled to know that tonight we are recognizing Terry Hill. So Terry, if you could wheel on over here and join us, we'd appreciate it. Okay, let me read my part and then we'll have the acceptance speech. Terry is being, as I said, recognized for a Lifetime Achievement Award, received only prior to this by our good friend David Mason. Terrence Hill is eligible for the City of Ojai Historic Preservation Lifetime Achievement Award based on criteria number 3, which is for interpretation of historic properties. Criteria number 4, which is for historical research, including oral history supporting historic preservation, and criteria number 6, which is for grassroots organizational efforts in historic preservation. Terry Hill is being recognized for his contributions toward conserving the history of Ojai since first being appointed to the Historic Preservation Commission in 1993. Be 25 years ago. Thank you, Terry, for your 25 years of service on the Ojai's Historic Preservation Commission and the fine legacy you leave us. This is our monument. You get that inside joke, don't you? To you, our good friend and colleague. The inside joke is through all of the years that we've been talking about this, Terry has been adamant that if the place isn't there anymore, that we at least put a monument to remember what once stood in that spot. So Terry, you are our living monument.
Thank you, Brian. I really am humbled by the notion that you would recognize me after so many years of my personal pleasure of doing something like this that was so historically important to the city of Ojai. I wrote a few notes down here so that I don't miss anybody, because there's names that mean a lot to me. 25 years ago, Pat Clark Dorner, Rose Boggs, Margaret Meninger, and myself, we became the newest members of the HPC. When I first came to a meeting, I didn't know what I was doing. Joe DeVito and Steve Olson had assured me, they said, just go to your first meeting and you'll do just fine. And I did, and I was as quiet as a church mouse. That didn't last very long, though. And within a couple of meetings, I was chiming in with my information. But that first group of people, which included Betty McAllister, who was a giant of a preservationist, and Rose Boggs, a great pioneer, Patty Fry, who wrote the first Ojai book, and Selma Wilson, a world-class architect, were the incumbent members of the group. And I came in, and I was a history teacher from Villanova, and I wondered how I would fit in. The first thing I decided what I had to do, I had to devour any and all of the books that had been written about Ojai, read all the newspapers from Ojai that were published by the Ojai Valley News and the Signal. And I read of all the great people that have made themselves important to our town. I listened to all the tales that David Mason told me because he had a lot to tell. He sat right in back of me as the representative of the Ojai Valley Museum for years. And he had been a member of the first Ojai Historic Preservation Commission, and later became part of the Ventura County Historical Cultural Board. But as the years passed, the stories that were told, we identified buildings and sites, and it was important that the stories be remembered. And that was significant because it was after we had researched, after we had verified our research, that we granted the plaques that you see around town today. When we started out, we were met with a lot of opposition about identifying buildings. There was one council member that didn't want to see any of the little brown plaques about town. He said, pretty soon you're going to have every house in Ojai identified. But we wouldn't see that. And if you look at how much care we gave to the process, in the 25 years that I served, and the few years that the commission existed before that, we're only on, I think they said 21, what Brian said tonight. Anyway, I'll always cherish the great bull sessions, the historic bull sessions that I had with Craig Walker and David Mason, Rose Boggs, and Brian Akins. Brian Akins is a lot like myself. He and I shared the enthusiasm for finding out something about Ojai and collecting it. If there was a matchbook that was heard of in for a motel in Ojai, we would go at odds on eBay or go to an antique store just to buy that thing to put in our collections. I look back now at the people that we had on our commission over the years, And we had authors, we had historians, professors, architects, landmark owners, teachers, and members of pioneer families. I think we've done a pretty good job. As for the future years, I've assessed the current roster, and I think that the commission is in good hands and will serve the community quite well. I just want to tell one story to leave with you tonight, because I think it's kind of ironic. When I was a young kid, we would go on family vacations, and my mother always wanted to make sure her children knew the value of history. And she would make my dad stop at every mission bell that you could see along Highway 101. Or she would make us stop at the little markers in front of different buildings. And when we got to the city of Monterey, she went wild, and she would make my dad stop so that she could write down the entire message that was on those historic plaques. And so at this point in time, I think it's a bit ironic that I would be one of the people that should decide what those historic plaques are in Ojai. So the full cycle came around. So thank you again. Thank you to my fellow commissioners that have served with me over these years. And thanks to all of you. You've been great to us, and historic preservation is alive and well. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, Terry. An award a recognition well deserved, and it's a great pleasure to be able to present this to you. Remembering back when we co-chaired the swim meets over at Nordhoff High School, and Claire teaching all the children. That's the real heritage of Ojai, and what we like to think of as the real Ojai. So let me come around here so Steve can get our picture of it.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we?
I just have
There you go,
one
Suze.
correction, just two quick corrections, because we have our newest member to the HPC who's our fact checker. Elise reminded me that Julie Tumamaya Stensley was a prior annual recipient, but she was an annual before she was a lifetime. See? Occasionally, you even have to correct the fact checkers. No. So Elise reminded me that, again, Julie was an annual and then a lifetime achievement recipient. Thank you, Julie. And that there's 25 landmarks. So, thank you, Mayor.
And we have to create a new award called the Eternal Award so that Julie still has something to work for.
You won't know.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
It's a fan.
Thank you. Good to see you, Claire.
It's a family. Good community, huh?
What? Yeah. Now the others can sit down. Let's see who's left.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney, we go right into the redevelopment agency, successor agency, is that,
So that one had been, as I understand it, voted on previously.
right?
So
But is that all we have to do?
yes.
Oh, okay, great.
So we are good there, so we can
So now we go to.
adjourn the redevelopment agency, successor agency portion of the meeting. Would be fine.
We may adjourn that now?
Yes,
Okay.
if
well,
desired.
Without objection, we will adjourn the, the successor agencies meeting, and we'll go to the consent calendar. Do we have a motion on everything but the items that were pulled?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any objection? So ordered. Okay, so we now have F. Bill, are you?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Mayor. I just had a couple questions on this. The reason I pulled it, and that was in 3 items, we have pending council direction and ongoing, namely the revisit policy on short-term rental enforcement, affordable housing Montgomery project, and the commitment MOU from Casitas. Just by virtue of an example, I just want to bring up that we had talked about code enforcement, and we'd had basically an ad hoc committee consisting of the mayor and myself that met with the city manager, and I thought we were at the point of getting some, waiting for proposals from staff rather than having it be pending council direction. You know, there's no timeline for pending council direction. It could be forever. And the same thing on the commitment MOU from Casitas. I don't remember exactly what that was, but I guess I'm just bringing up the point that I'm uncomfortable with pending council direction when I thought we were in a posture of waiting for staff recommendations.
Understood, and I'd be happy to respond back to that. I think some of these things were put on several months ago, and I think the target may have changed a little bit, and I don't think the verbiage here got updated. So I know at one point, the council had expressed, and this is going back over a year ago, or maybe not quite that far, about maybe looking at beefing up what we're doing in terms of our current policy and the current tools that we have in the toolkit for staff.
And they had the mayor and I asked to talk with you separately, and we did.
Right, right. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the conversation that we had at the council level was if we wanted to go further level in terms of looking at, whether or not we want to look at other avenues that we could pursue, whether it was, for example, if we wanted to stings or things like that. So,
Right.
but I don't know that we had ever gotten the direction back from council to go that route. So, but we
Well,
can clarify that
I
today.
kind of thought that the council direction had delegated to the mayor and I. We talked to you, and there was a sense of we'd like some recommendations on beefing it up. But I mean, I guess I'm just uncomfortable with pending council direction that could just be nothing forever. And like to
Agreed.
see some staff recommendations.
I got that. Okay. If everybody agrees with that being the purpose of the goal, we can.
Yeah, I would concur with Bill's remarks. I think that what we're looking for is, maybe we should have another session with the subcommittee, Bill, but I think we need to have some recommendations as to an approach to this with an identification of what resources would be necessary and what problems may crop up. Because as we all know, in this town, there are a lot of things that have gone on over many decades, if not a century, and that they haven't actually complied with all of the rules.
Indeed.
And I, for one, don't want to go back and try to correct everything in history, but if we would nibble around the edges of things that are particularly important to the community and start kind of either change the rules or enforce what we've got is kind of the goal, so.
Yes,
Okay.
that's my comment on F.
Okay, anything
Okay.
else?
Well, we'll make that correction. I would agree with that. We'll change that verbiage so that that city manager will be coming back to staff with some recommendations and options. So, thank you for that.
Okay. So with that, we'd receive and
That's it.
file?
Yes.
Okay, so,
So moved.
okay, moves. I'll second it. Any objection?
Nope.
If not, so ordered. Now we go to G, which is the adoption of the cultivation of cannabis
Manufacturer.
Not
or
cultivation.
manufacturing. And I know we had some cards of people that would like to comment, and I don't know if the council does, but I have a couple of comments I'd like to make. So let's start with the public comments. I have a card here from Bill Miley. Bill, would you like to address the council? And I have Bob Daddy on deck.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Bill Miley. I live in Ojai. How you vote tonight may change the personality of the entire valley. My comments are directed at what I believe will improve the draft ordinance. Here are my concerns and suggestions. Regarding manufacturing, the draft ordinance calls for 2 standalone type 6 and 3 micro businesses type 12, which will be permitted to get a manufacturing type 6, giving our city up to 5 manufacturing. I believe 5 is too many and unnecessary. So I suggest that the standalones be taken out of the ordinance, they be removed. Revenue generation. Manufacturing does not pay sales tax. There will be no revenue coming to the city, yet the city will have oversight and regulation enforcement responsibilities, and they won't get any money. To the best of my knowledge, jobs being created here are not living wage jobs, $12.50 and $15.50 per hour. If you work 2,000 hours a year, that gets $25,000 and $35,000. Person, family can't live on that here. City income from 3 dispensaries is strictly from sales tax, and probably not much. California sales tax is 7.5. The state takes 6, and we get 1.5. I predict we take less revenue in than it costs for us to provide the service and regulation enforcement. I suggest seriously that you consider allowing the voters to consider a cannabis tax. As to type 7 extract, it doesn't belong here. I join others who think that it's not good for our small city to license a business which brings in raw cannabis, needing removal of contaminants, including pesticides. And then I understand the dispensaries when they can buy pure oil from somebody else. The prohibiting of cultivation needs to be permanent. Why? I have recently been told by a number of people that the odor and smell of growing cannabis off Highway 192 in Carpinteria, near the high school, is very strong and disturbing. One person who has lived here a long time says it smells like a skunk. It's really bad. Santa Barbara has over 100 acres of organic cannabis. It apparently doesn't need to be purified. Who's counting? Nobody is counting in increased traffic. We should be counting it. Also, we should be collecting data on other things, and we should start doing it now. We need to know the impact it's having on our city and the larger community. We need to support our dispensaries and not unnecessarily promote competition for them. Three is a lot, and they're all around the corner. Keep the manufacturing and the micro business. Cannabis is a growing business. The state should allow, we should follow state law on tax, generate income. So in summary, delete the 2 manufacturing standalone licenses. We don't need them. They don't pay sales tax. They can be large as they want, and they sell over California, and they probably won't provide living wages. Only allow micro businesses to have type 6. Deny a license for 7. They pay no tax. They bring contaminated. Develop the city report on cost benefit of cannabis for our city and now and in the future. And the last one is let the voters decide on a cannabis tax. Not for adult use, medical, as you know, doesn't pay. So, and Santa Barbara, as an example, has a 20% tax. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Johnston?
Yes.
Yeah, just for the record, I want to state that, A, the cultivation ban is in place, remains, and is not part in any way, shape, or form of this introduced ordinance. There is no cultivation allowed in Ojai other than what's required by state law for personal use. And number 2, there's no type 7 in this introduced ordinance.
Okay. Did you have?
Yeah, people keep bringing up about increased traffic. There is no increased traffic. It's manufacturing. There's no commerce. There's no people going in and out
Okay.
of the building. And as far, the living wage, this is different from
Okay,
retail.
we're not debating it at this
Oh.
point. I'm not sure if you're clarifying something.
I'm
Otherwise-
clarifying that he said that they don't pay a living wage. And this is entirely different from retail. It requires highly skilled workers. They will get a good salary.
Okay. Bob Daddy.
Mayor, and I presume after the 14th continuous count, still mayor. I'm not really sure how this thing is going to end up. They
I am
seem
till
to
the
be
10th.
finding thousands and thousands and
He is until
thousands more
certified
votes.
otherwise.
Yeah, so good luck for everybody. I went ahead and gave you these just so we can lightning bolt through this thing and you have something to take a look at. So I'm going to hit this thing pretty quick. I've taken a look and I've highlighted your ordinance, and I have a lot of issues with it, and I think you need an awful lot of corrections and thoughts. One of the things we do very well is leave everything vague and open to interpretation, and then we fight about it for decades. It's time to stop that type of a situation. So when we get in here, my comments are at the top, but I'd like to go through these things number by number. 2, when was the traffic study done, and why don't we have a permanent traffic study? We have a $4,000 traffic box that we can simply put to a poll, and we know exactly when, what, who, how many, and how fast. We have it. It sits on the shelf. It's not used. I am ticked that we don't use it more. When we go down to discussion, it says subject to regulations promulgated by the city manager, and then it goes into mention that a couple of more times. I would hope that somewhere in here that they would be approved by the city council. The next bullet point, it says that you're going to issue these to 3 dispensaries. What I'm asking is, do they have by right? Is it by right? It says you're going to issue 3. Can you issue just 1? But it says up to 3. And so I think that's something that you need to concern yourself with until we really know where we're going. When we go to the next page, the ordinance, again, promulgated by the city manager and approved by the city manager. Where is the oversight by the council on that? It says that we're going to give 3 licenses, and micro-business license shall be issued to an applicant who possesses an existing commercial medical. But the question is that by right? You're going to issue 3. Each one of the 3 that currently have licenses, is it their right to absolutely get the next license? It doesn't. We put a lot of statements in here, but we don't answer a lot of questions. It says manufacturer and micro businesses licensed are non-transferable. What if there's a merger? What do you do then? What do you do when you have 1, 2, or all 3 merge into a single business? What is your answer? We have, like I say, all these things in the ordinance, but we don't have any answers to them. It says the sheriff's department inspection approval, da-da-da-da-da-da, and it says zoning and land use permit per the permitted entitlement conditions. What does that mean? So I'd really like you to go back and look at this before you vote on it. When you get down here, you've got a bunch of missing words, unfortunately, and misspellings. Cannabis manufacturing facilities probably shall have an operation plan. And then when it talks about food manager, food safety, who certifies that? Is that certified by the public health department? But if we're going to do it, make it specific. When we get in here and we talk about the manufacturing equipment, the family gas detection, we removed Garlic Gold and Ojai Coffee Roaster for the city because of the smell. And so when you put this stuff in here, where's the level? When we go to the next one, it says cannabis manufacturing should. Really? Should? Should is permissive. That means I don't have to do this. Shouldn't it be shall or must? Because should, yeah, we should do a lot of things, but we're not mandated. I'd like you to take a look at this thing and see if this thing shouldn't be discussed and have some extra clarification. My time's up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other cards? Okay, we'll now bring it back to council for comment and deliberation.
I'd just like to make a couple fact checks. From what Mr. Daddy just said. Number one, I believe this ordinance and our existing ordinances, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, does not allow by right for anything. It's a revocable license. There is no entitlement created that other than the license itself.
That's correct.
Very clear, I believe, in
Yes.
all of this ordinance.
That's true for the existing medical and adult use cannabis dispensary and delivery licenses, and would be true, and is true for the recently approved cannabis testing lab licenses, and would be true under this ordinance if adopted. All of the existing and proposed medical and adult use cannabis licenses are discretionary actions subject to the decision of the city manager, of course, cabined by the council's direction to set standards and requirements.
Right, but there's no establishment of a by right.
No, these are not by right.
And the other point I wanted to make, just real quick, is that there is in the packet a full set of regulations and requirements that's here for the city council to approve, attachment B. So, in fact, the council is, as we adjusted at the introduction of the ordinance, a full set of regulations that is published here in the packet that is subject to approval by the council, and further amendment for that matter.
Yeah, and furthermore, everything has to be approved by the police department and the fire department, health and safety. There's numerous regulations that have to be met. And it's all spelled out in attachment B, which I've read 3 times and underlined almost every word. It's very clear.
And in addition, any operators have to secure the state's licensure.
Yes.
Mayor, I have one question. And what's the difference between non-transferable and merger? Can you explain that? Are we prohibiting 2 companies from merging?
No, we don't have the power to prohibit mergers. We do, though, have the power to require upon a merger the newly constituted company meet the requirements of the code. So upon a merger or a change in organization or a transfer like that, the new ones would have to show that they meet the requirement. Meet
And is
the
that
requirements.
written anywhere in any of our package here?
That would be inherent in the licenses as non-transferable. It could be spelled out further if the council wished.
Well, I think we need to have a better understanding of it. What are the consequences of it? What would someone have to do in the event of they wanted to merge? That would help them if they're planning to merge to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and what are the effects of that merger.
That can be clarified through revised regulations, of course. The short answer would be any entity that proposes to merge, they have to apply for transferring the permit, the license, not permit, the city cannabis license, show that they meet the requirements, which include passing the criminal background check, having the owners be within 5 years residency in Ventura County, and meeting the rest of the rules and regulations.
And if they have a micro license, do they keep 2 licenses when they merge, or do they lose a license?
If they merge, I think they would only have 1 license.
And where's that
Now,
spelled
that
out?
1 license could have two
So you see what I'm saying? So where's that spelled out? And I think that's what Mr. Daddy was talking to. So
That can
I'm just
certainly
wondering
be
if we
added.
need to add a clarification.
Yeah.
I'll go along with what the rest of the council wants to do, but
Yeah, I have some of the same concerns. Paul?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just was, are you talking about a merger with a company that doesn't currently have a license? Or are you talking about 2 companies that have licenses merging? That was my question. And does it make a difference?
yeah, well, to me, it doesn't make a difference. It could be either or. So,
That's why we have the non-transferability clause.
Right, okay. As far as some of the comments I heard, I don't think we should have anything in an ordinance that should say something should be done. I think it shall be done. If it doesn't have to be done, why do we have it there? And as far as the typographical errors, that should be corrected by staff. My major concern is that this approves the micro businesses in license 6, type 6. But are we saying that we're going to allow 3 licenses, type 6 licenses, but only for those that currently have the licenses for medical or recreational use now?
The 3 that will be limited to the existing licenses, existing licensed dispensaries would be, under this proposal, the type 12 micro businesses,
Correct,
which allows types N, 6, and P,
right, but not 7.
but not 7.
So what we're saying is that if any one of these 3 want to be micro businesses, they're allowed to be. But if an independent company wants to be, we're not going to allow that.
That's how
Okay.
this is structured, yes.
Okay, I wanted to be clear on that.
Right, but the city manager is correct. The independent companies could, of course, apply for a type 6 license or the subtypes below type 6, meaning N and P, but they would only be allowed to manufacture. Standalone entities that don't have a dispensary license right now could not apply to be a micro business because the council has limited retail to 3, and all three slots are presently filled.
Okay. So there wouldn't be any more than 3. For instance, you couldn't have the 3 currently licensed dispensaries and then have 3 micro businesses,
No, but
separate
you-
and apart.
No, but the total number of manufacturing facilities would be 5. The 3 presently licensed dispensaries could each add micro businesses to their list of businesses. And then 2 more independent manufacturing facilities could exist.
Okay, well, that's where I was
Under
getting
the
at.
present proposal.
Why are we allowing those extra 2?
That's the question
I
for
mean,
the council.
that to me, I think it's too many. I think we should limit it to just the people that are licensed now.
Right, and I thought that's what our
I
amendment
thought that that's
did
what we had
the la-
done.
at the last
That's why I
meeting.
was a little confused.
Well, yeah, no, what we did was we eliminated type 7, but we allowed
Right.
the maximum of 2 and the maximum of 3.
Okay.
That's what we did
Okay.
last time.
Well, I would suggest that we limit it to 3.
Sure.
Can we amend this and remove the 2 and just keep it to the 3 micro tonight, or does it have to come back?
It would have to return, but you can do it, yes. You would introduce it as revised to delete the standalone 2 tonight, and then it'll come back at your next meeting for adoption.
Okay. Is that a motion?
I'll be willing to make a motion for that if you'd like.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Now,
Okay.
what is your concern about the 2 standalone?
I don't think we need 5 manufacturing
Well,
organizations.
What, are you 100% sure that the other 3, I mean, I haven't thought this through. This does not sound right to me. What's driving this? Why are you objecting to a legal standalone business? Why?
Well, if we want to limit it to 3, I'd be all right with it.
Why are you objecting to 2 more?
Yeah, why don't you, that's, direct it through the chair so we don't
I'm
end up in
objecting
a-
because I don't think we need 5 manufacturing facilities.
Why is it that you think it's okay for Ojai to have, at the last count, something like 84 alcohol-serving businesses when alcohol is the leading cause of death, is causing more death than opioids, and it's increasing every year? I have with me a recent article in USA Today. Why are you singling this
Okay.
out? What phobia is driving this?
Well, I don't believe it's a phobia.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, why are we limiting it to 3 dispensaries then? You voted for that. Why did you limit it to 3?
Okay, well, let's run it through the chair so this doesn't end up into a cross-examination and a debate. The idea,
Well, I'm gonna make a
everybody state their
motion.
position. We have a
I'm gonna make a
motion, we have a
motion
second to the
That,
motion.
I'm going to make a motion that we allow 3 micro businesses, all of which have to be currently licensed dispensaries.
Right,
That's my motion.
I
okay,
believe we have a second on that already.
right. So it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Yeah, I have a different take, and that is, I'm troubled with the inconsistencies here. We keep talking about the fact that we want to diversify this, tourist-centric economy, and yet so often when we are presented with opportunities to do just that, we find a reason to back off. I don't see that having 2 plus 3 has an enormous impact. We have, it's a maximum of 2 more installations over what we already have. And I just think if we're serious about, being consistent with trying to diversify this economy, we should support those opportunities when they arise. So that's my concern.
Okay,
Can I-
Yep,
Yeah,
Randy.
I'm not, I think, first of all of us here on council agree that we all believe that medical marijuana has a place in this community. And I think if we go back to the original place that occurred here. We had a co-op here that was serving 85 to 90 people, distributing cannabis through their co-op. That co-op was all the community needed at the time. Then all of a sudden Prop 64 passes, and now there's a rush to add more to more to more, so we did. In hindsight, I'm not gonna get into that discussion, but one served the community well, and now we've moved it to 3. Then we come back and we move the 3 from medical, because that's what the goal was originally, to now we need to give recreational, and we did that. The question, Souza, that has to come is why, Mayor,
Yeah.
the question is, why are we running to 5 or 6 or 7 when we've already ran to 3? And Bill, we can always come back, or Mayor, we can always come back and amend this and add additional. We can even come back at a later date when there's more clarity on even type 7. As long as we have more information and more facts to base our decisions on. So we can always come back, but 3, I think 3 exceeds the needs of the community already. I don't have a sense we need 5. That's
Okay.
my take.
I have some questions of the staff.
I didn't get a chance to respond.
Well, I haven't had
He
a chance.
asked me a question.
No,
He asked me, why did I vote?
I am not.
I didn't ask that.
Souza, it's through the chair. Everybody gets a chance, including the chair. And I would like to ask a question of staff, which is, how many medical dispensaries are there in Ventura County, all told?
Oh, I don't have that total off the top of my head. I know there's,
Last time I asked that question, someone said there were 5. I don't know if anything's been added to it, but 3 of the 5 are here in our city, and we've done that. As Randy says, maybe we overdid it, but maybe not. And how many adult recreation licenses are out there?
You mean in the
In
city?
the county of, no, the county of Ventura, the total county.
In the county, I don't have that total. I know there are several in Port Hueneme. I'd have to get you the total on that.
Okay, well, at the
And,
time we did it here, nobody but us, and we had 3.
Correct.
Okay. How many micro businesses are there in Ventura County?
None currently that I'm aware of.
So we would end up with 5 and be the only ones that have it. I guess my comment is that I support Paul and Randy's comments that we can do 1 that would be adequate as far as I'm concerned, and do it by lottery, and then we could expand it, or we could even do 3 and tie it to starting out with medical dispensaries, because that was the discussion originally. We needed to provide that service to our citizens. And now we've turned it into diversifying the economy. I submit that 5 manufacturing operations in Ojai is not diversifying. It might be diversifying the economy of Ventura County, but 1 would diversify, and we could then add to it if the market warranted it. So, Susan, you had some.
It's clear from this discussion that you are prejudiced against the product because you don't have that concern about all the coffee breweries, wineries. The town is saturated with various businesses that no one objects to. You know, at a core, there is, due to the fact that it was illegal for over a century, you're still stuck.
When you say you, are you addressing that to me?
All the people that are trying to limit this legal business. And Paul Blatz asked me, why did I vote for 3? I voted for 3 because that seemed like a reasonable, because there were no, I felt if I had my druthers, I would have them located different places around the valley, not all 3 in one area, so just like any normal business, you know. And in the future, this will become a normal business. All of this phobia will be, you know, it'll seem, it's old thinking, it's outdated. I had a long discussion about this with my nephew, Supervisor Doss Williams, and in Santa Barbara, everything is legal, and when you don't encourage legality, all you're doing is driving the black market. When they legalized cultivation in Santa Barbara, he said that all the illegal ones moved to Ventura County, and the same is going to happen here. You need to encourage the legal businesses and not discourage it. And as far as I'm concerned, there's something like 168 cities that permit well, there's probably about 300 that permit all manufacturing. So I'm not sure what's driving this.
Why must we discuss this in terms of motives and prejudice? It is a new business enterprise that nobody has yet really figured out. If you go to Portland, Oregon, you will discover that it's in the newspapers every day with the market dropping out because the products are not necessarily doing everything that they said they were doing, and they ended up with too much on the market, and so people weren't being able to be successful with it. So it seems to me that because some of us view this as a business venture as opposed to a personal lifestyle choice or some kind of, health food, that we're somehow prejudiced against it. We already have more than anybody in Ventura County. And if Santa Barbara approved this countywide, that may explain why they're having maybe more success. But as long as Ojai approves multiple outlets while the other jurisdictions are doing nothing, we are concentrating this in our town. And then we're told that it's not going to have any effect on traffic. A question for the staff. Has anybody set a baseline on the traffic on Bryant Street? Are we measuring traffic over there at any time?
No, that would be done if we were to do a specific, traffic study, but we haven't had anything that would be driving that, so.
I'm only, and maybe it's a rhetorical question.
Very well.
The question is that we are not measuring any of these things, and yet we then dispute one another as to what the facts are. We don't even have any facts, and we don't have a baseline to which to measure it. So it has a lot of effect on the community. Why do we want 5? We went from not having any a few weeks ago to now proposing 5 instead of 3. So I'm not quite sure what's driving it either. Anyway, other comments?
And I did have a conversation with a business owner on Bryant Street, and I think he's in the audience, and he said there has not been any noticeable impact in traffic. So I don't know if he wants to step forward and say that. But
that's not data, and that's opinions,
Okay, but the manufacturing in and of itself is not going to noticeably increase
Right.
traffic.
I'm not arguing that
that's
point. You are correct. I'm just saying that we have an inordinate number all concentrated in one area without having any real experience behind it, and nobody's collecting any data, and so we can't really argue over how much traffic is there or not. I don't know why we as a city don't, the Public Works Department doesn't periodically do like the Caltrans does and measure it. Clearly, we're having a change in our traffic patterns since the brew pub opened on Montgomery and the Ojai Avenue, and there are consequences to those things.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, may I make another comment, please?
Sure.
Okay, I think this is a ludicrous discussion. If you want to look at traffic impact, look at the festivals every weekend. If you want to look, Creek Road, I believe it was during the Lavender Festival, was like a freeway, I was told by the residents. Okay, it's just, to me, again, you may deny that you're prejudiced, but I feel like you're singling out this business because so many businesses in Ohio have a traffic impact, and I haven't heard this level of protest against those kind of other businesses. That's what I want to say. It's just, if you want to reduce traffic, stop having festivals. We're not going to do that. I mean, we may not have a traffic study, but when I've gone down Bryant Street, I don't see traffic congestion on Bryant Street.
I'm not even saying
dispensaries.
I'm not suggesting that there is, but there are people that will also come to the meeting, I know they may even be here this evening, who will tell you the exact opposite, and I have no basis for it, so then I go around asking people what they think, and I get a half a dozen different opinions. And a lot of them are in business over there. So we don't know. All I'm saying is that why do we not start when we're giving out something new and permits to start out in a nice, moderate way, do it, measure it, and then expand it if it were successful? Why are we now suddenly becoming the Cannabis Central for Ventura County when the Board of Supervisors has had these measures before them. And we've got communities in this valley that are equal to, in size, population, to Ojai, and none of them have any of this. And it would seem to me, just as a delivery of service to the customers, that you would, as you say, you would spread it around. But there's no reason for other jurisdictions to make these decisions if Ojai decides they're going to do it all here in the valley. So, I think Paul's motion is simply to slow it down a bit.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, just in response, first of all, I'm ready to vote. I think we know where the votes are. But I just want to say in response to what you said, I'm actually quite proud that the city of Ojai and the people of Ojai, which remember, voted for Prop 64 3 out of 4, that we have taken a lead in the way that our citizens, I think, themselves think of themselves as leaders in terms of rationalizing the situation with cannabis, with looking at it as the best way to handle this is legalized and regulated. And I do not apologize, and I'm proud to be part of a city that took the lead in this. So that's just how I feel.
You can tell by your language that you think of this as a negative product. It's very obvious by the language that you use, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And I agree with Bill. We should be proud that we're leaders in this.
Right.
And I'm just very disappointed in this line of thinking.
So,
Randy.
so that we can stop the debate, again, and I'm not going to get into debating you like this today or tonight. It's just not right, okay? Let's just look at it this way. Alls we're asking is that we slow this down to something that the council can manage or that the community can manage. We have clearly demonstrated what Bill has said. We have led. We have 3 more than most cities have anywhere in this county other than Port Hueneme. So it's disingenuous for you to say we're, for some reason, hate cannabis or hate medical cannabis or hate this. It's to the contrary. So let's just accept what we have here. Let's vote and let's move this forward.
Okay, and just for clarification, I happen to be one of the people that supported the proposition to make it legal, as did members of my family. But if you go back and look at what was on the ballot, nobody said that by doing this, we were voting for level 7 or type 7 licenses. Nobody said that you would have a half a dozen of these in less than 4 square miles. Those are all choices that were left in that we could make as a local jurisdiction, and we're trying to do that in an orderly way. So I'm sorry that you take this as some sort of prejudicial approach to it. Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment, Mr. Mayor, that I wanted to make a comment that when issues like this come before the council, my philosophy has always been to meet and to listen to people that want to meet with me to talk about it. However, for those of you that contacted me that had a financial stake in the vote, I typically do not meet with people that have a financial stake in the vote, but I want to assure you that I read all the documentation that you provided to me, and I wasn't doing it because I didn't want to meet with you. It's just my philosophy is I'll meet with members of the public at large and listen to them as whether they're for or against a particular item, but anybody that has a financial stake or an applicant, I typically don't meet with or speak with before we deliberate. So I wanted to just make that known to the people that contacted me that I didn't get back to.
Okay, then call for the question. Is that?
I-
Too late for public opinion. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes, it is.
Well, we never had a public comment.
There will be, right now, we are voting on an amendment. Then when this comes back to us, public will then again have a chance to come up and comment.
Okay, I would like to please comment about the timeline, because maybe you're not aware that in addition to the 30-day wait till the ordinance takes effect, anyone applying for a manufacturing license has missed the deadline for a temporary license. And it's going to be at least probably 6 months before they can even start their business. So that takes us, they've missed the deadline. The deadline is December 2nd. So there's no way that anyone can do this until the middle of next year.
So it's not a problem then. I mean, that part is all done. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying it's not a problem.
You are saying that it's a moot point.
I also what disappoints me most is that why didn't you bring these issues up? If this is at the beginning,
Well, the issue we're
I-
talking about right now was brought up in an amendment, and we thought that had been taken care of, and then we get the ordinance back, and it was apparently not clear, and now it's being clarified.
Well, I disagree. I think the ordinance was
Okay.
very clear.
Well, no, the ordinance is clear, it's not just not
And-
what we had
And
asked.
the regulations.
Well, that's
they're-
a separate
they're fu-
motion.
They're
Yeah, right.
foolproof.
Get this vote.
Yeah.
Okay, will the clerk call the roll on the amendment?
Mayor Johnston,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
No.
Councilmember Wyrick,
No.
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
All right, I don't believe we need to take any further action. This will be a reintroduced ordinance.
No, Mr. City Attorney, is that right?
As I understand the vote that was just taken, that was to amend and introduce the ordinance with the deletion of the separate 2 standalone manufacturing facilities. It will return at your next meeting for adoption, revised to reflect that deletion of the allowance for 2 standalone cannabis manufacturing facilities.
And also the changing of the word should and fixing typos.
Correct. And the regulations could be voted on now, or
I'd like to make a
Perhaps-
motion to approve the regulations as presented in attachment B.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion? Well, wait a minute, okay, we're moving on, we've taken care of it, now you'll recraft the,
well, I was going to say, you can vote on the regulations now, or we can take the direction regarding mergers and transferability, edit them, and bring it back to the next meeting.
nice.
Well, I made a motion to approve them as presented.
Okay, I move to amend the motion to postpone to a time certain to when the ordinance comes back.
Second.
Okay, discussion on the amendment? Okay, roll call on the amendment?
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney,
Yes.
Mayor Johnston,
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick,
No.
Councilmember Francina,
No.
Okay, so this will all come back,
Well, that was an amendment to the
That was
motion.
an amendment to the
We need to vote on
motion.
the underlying motion.
okay?
That is correct.
So the underlying motion is to bring it back?
To direct staff to return with revised regulations at the same time as the ordinance.
Okay? Any
I'm not
discussion?
sure I understand that.
I'm not sure I did either, Susan.
So the vote that was just taken was the motion.
It was to amend my motion. This is the
Well,
amended
yeah, well, it's a
underlying.
motion to postpone. I'm not sure that that's actually.
Well, it was phrased as a motion to amend, not a motion to postpone.
Okay, shall I rephrase it?
The action.
The idea was to
Action's been
table
done.
We
the
understand the
motion to
idea, but
certain-
no matter what we can't rephrase what was just done. My recommendation is simply move
Well,
to.
we can have a second amendment.
That is also
Okay,
possible.
yeah, I made
But
a
you still-
motion to approve.
Any amendment, the goal I think you would have sought would have been a substitute motion,
Okay,
not an amendment.
Yeah,
I
okay.
realize I'm being picky.
I had a
but-
motion to approve that was, and an amendment that you suggested was passed. So the amended motion is on the table.
That is correct.
the amended motion is, yeah, right, okay.
You need a second on the amended motion?
Yes.
Okay, second it.
What,
Ma'am, you
No,
wanna-
no,
Who's on
actually, that's right.
first?
You don't, because it's already been voted on.
Right,
I stand corrected.
I want to vote last.
So the amended motion is before the council for a vote.
Right.
Right.
And deliberation.
Which is to amend the ordinance before us and bring it back at the next meeting, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah,
Oh,
with
now
the,
we're back to the ordinance.
This motion was
Just a regular.
to bring the regulations back at the time the ordinance is considered by the council.
Right,
and also clear up the language with regard to
exactly,
Right.
to mergers.
right.
Okay, roll call?
Mayor Pro Tem Haney,
Yes.
Mayor Johnston,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
No.
Councilmember Wyrick,
Yes,
Okay, we will now go to public comment. We're a little late on that, but it always seems to be when this subject comes up, it takes longer. So, if I have only one card, and that card is from Ulrich Brugger.
My name is Ulrich Brugger, 39 Tarwina Lane.
Hi, Ulrich.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members. As you know, the Ojai Retreat might have to close its doors by the end of the year, despite the fact that we have the highest occupancy rate in town, close to 80%. The reason of the problem is that we do not have enough bedrooms. And for 24 years, the county refused to allow us to add 1 single square foot. 1 single square foot. However, the good news is, a year ago, the county reviewed its policy, and now they said we have about 1,400 square footage available to add 4 to 6 more cabins, which would resolve our problem. The Ojai Retreat would be profitable, and its operation would be guaranteed forever. However, it takes a long time to get the permit. We have been discussing with the county for more than a year. We applied for the permit, and we still don't have it. And the reason for my speak this evening is to ask you if you could ask this, Supervisor Bennett and the head of the different departments to accelerate our application process, because if you have to wait another year or two, we will not be here. And we will have to close our doors by the end of the year. And that is a fact. And the reason is we never got enough bedrooms for 24 years. 24 years. And until now, there was a benefactor who covered all the deficits. And this benefactor cannot pay anymore. So if we don't get this permit very quickly, and if we don't get donations by the end of the year, the Ojai Retreat will become most probably a private residence and closed to the public. And you might know that we offered cultural and educational events for the community for 25 years, and it might come to an end. But you might be able to fix the problem if you can put some pressure on the county to expedite our application. I don't know if you can do that, but if you can, we would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Ulrich,
Sure.
has the county given you any indication of when they might do it, or is it just in limbo?
It's in limbo.
Oh,
They
okay.
told us, they told our architect about a year ago that we have enough square footage now, but every month the law changes. Every month we hear something different, and it's really frustrating. And I'll give you just one example. For instance, recently we asked the county to give us in writing that we have this 1,400 square footage available. The answer was, pay us $400 and we give you the answer in 3 weeks. A job that can be done in 1 hour. They said 3 weeks. After 3 weeks said, we need another week. After 4 weeks they said, we need another week. We don't even have the answer of a small job after 5 weeks. And this is really frustrating. And the survival of an Ojai Retreat is at stake because of this. So if you could help us, that would really be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
But I only think it would help if Supervisor Bennett with the different heads of the departments come together and agree to accelerate this process. Because if it doesn't go on, even in 2 years, we will not have the permit.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll contact Mr. Bennett's office and see what it is, what role the city can play in it.
Yeah.
I have one more public comment card. Mr. Daddy.
Well, thank you for having this at 8 o'clock. I love this idea that people have time certain. They can go home, they can eat, they can visit the kids, they can do stuff, and then they can be here, and they know when you're going to start. I'm disappointed Christine's not here.
But we missed our time certain by almost 20 minutes.
I'm sorry about that. But again, we didn't have to get there too quick. I want to make something abundantly clear. I lose a lot of people in my agency every year. I lose between 180 and 200 people that pass. Of the 20 licenses issued by the state of California for cannabis, I was only ever against a single license, and that's 17.
Would you repeat those figures, please?
Of the 20 licenses in California,
Where did you get that figure?
the 20 licenses are listed on the 3 different cannabis oversight. I'll send it to you. I have it. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
They're pretty simple. Again, I was only ever against type 7. In years past, I've lost a lot of clients to cancer, to death. And I've always asked them, have you tried CBDs? Have you tried marijuana? Have you looked at this thing? I've never been against that. I'm against the type of manufacturing. So I want to make that clear. Definitely not against cancer patients at end of life, cancer patients that need this, people that need these things. The one thing that I'm incredibly in favor of marijuana is that unlike aspirin and opioids, there's not been a single death attributed to an overdose. So I think that's something that I'll support. I think the other thing I would support is for you folks to take a look at this thing and move it into the community. I would like you to move the retail spaces out of Bryant Street. I'd like you to move those that want to strictly be retail, move it into retail. Those that want to manufacture have to stay in Bryant Street. The other thing is I tried this years ago with a man called Pedro Nava. He was our assemblyman. I asked him to sponsor a bill that every alcohol dispensary that had on-site alcohol have a voluntary machine that allowed people to test what their current limit was. It's like driving without a speedometer in a car. It's like no altimeter in a plane. What the hell? It takes away your inhibitions. The more you drink, the better off you are. So it would appear to me that I would like you folks, while we're discussing all this stuff, to come up with a bill that mandates that every one of the 84 places that serves alcohol have a small voluntary machine. They're really inexpensive now. People can blow and go. When Pedro Nava asked me, he says, what happens if you go there and you blow and it's a 1.0, I said I would go back to the bartender and I would order another drink and a cab because I knew I wasn't driving because I knew I was past my limit. So I really think that if we have 84 of these things, we ought to give people an opportunity to understand their sobriety. I think it's time. I think that if we want to lead in some areas, that's at least allow people to have an informed decision of how much of a public hazard they are. Thank you.
Okay.
Hate that gavel.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Okay. Does the clerk have any other? Okay, so we go back to the.
We have one more.
Oh, we do have one more?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Quick one. I know.
You have to give your name.
I'm sorry. My name is Brad Stewart, and I'm a resident of the city of Ojai and live on El Toro. I know that my business partner, Chet Hilgers, and I have spoken to some of you, but I wanted to kind of formally acknowledge, thank you, Steve, for your letter today. Wanted to formally acknowledge a receipt of your letter and ask that the council put the caravan outpost discussion on the next meeting so that we can clear up a zone issue and a question we have regarding our business. And just wanted to see if I could appeal to the council to give us a motion, second the motion, and vote in that you would indeed have that discussion at an upcoming meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
Your
thank you.
request is heard, and
Yeah.
when we deal with the future agendas, I'm sure someone will bring that up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, anything else?
Real quick, Chad Hilgers, 212 Grand Avenue. We about feel like part of the Historic Preservation Commission. About 25 years ago, we started the skate park. And being president of Skate Ojai, it's time now that we put up a plaque commemorating everybody that helped and all the groups and everybody, fundraisers, everything throughout the decades. And to do that, we've compiled about 800 names and groups, and we want to put that on display, maybe at the rec department with Sophocles, so everybody has a chance to look at it and see if we missed you. So we want to do that after the new year, so I just want to coordinate that with the city and Sophocles and just give everybody a chance to look at that list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Okay, is that, very good. So where are we here on the agenda? We're on item number,
There's one more person, it seems like.
what?
Kat Merrick, we were told by staff, city staff, that about a half an hour before that you guys had our waiver on for the event on Saturday, the Thomas Fire.
Right, it's on the
Yeah, it
agenda.
is?
Yeah,
Okay,
right,
so I
okay, thank
apologize.
you. Okay, so let's, adoption city ordinance, that's okay. So the public hearing on the third public hearing for testimony on the district map, that is item number
Right,
2.
Item number 2.
Okay, is it Doug?
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on up, Doug, I lied to you. When there were other things that,
Mr. Mayor, if we could have the city attorney give a brief introduction before we have Mr. Johnston
Okay.
speak. Thank you.
Thank you. The Mayor and Council, before you is the third public hearing in this 4 public hearing process for the Voting Rights Act issues. What's before you tonight is a set of 2 draft maps for consideration and discussion. No action is on the agenda for tonight, as action is taken at the 4th public hearing, not the 3rd public hearing. You'll recall that we're in this process because we received a demand letter contending that our existing at-large election system violates the State Voting Rights Act, which is a much looser standard than the Federal Voting Rights Act, as detailed in the staff report. City contends that that is not the case, that our system is lawful and legal. Nonetheless, the other cities that have fought have all to date lost and spent millions and millions of dollars doing so. And in mindful of that, the legislature created a safe harbor process under Elections Code Section 10,010 that allows a city to consider and then develop draft maps and switch to district-based elections for council in a relatively short time period, but in a way that limits the city's exposure to attorney's fees from the plaintiff organization to $30,000, much lower than the millions that have been paid by other cities. That process requires 4 public hearings. We've had the first 2 in which the council received input from members of the community regarding factors and communities of interest to consider in drawing the draft maps. Tonight is the first round of draft maps before you. We are looking for comments from the council and from the public as to changes to be made, information to be adjusted, and then the 4th public hearing now to be scheduled for December 11th at your regular council meeting on December 11th here at 7 p.m. We'll have revised maps taking into account the information derived tonight for public review and comment. The maps have been available on the city's website since Friday, November 16th. They will be updated taking into account tonight's commentary and also published on the city's website, and further publicity will be made for the December 11th meeting. Last, I'd like to introduce Douglas Johnson of National Demographics Corporation, who is the city's demographer and has a further presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mayor, members of council, pleasure to be here. So just very briefly, National Demographics, we've been doing this work since 1979 and have done it all over the state, actually Arizona, Nevada, and other places as well. It's gotten particularly busy since passage of the California Voting Rights Act, but we have worked with a number of your surrounding jurisdictions, Oxnard, Ventura. We're doing more or less the whole county right now, it seems like, as this spreads, as the city attorney just mentioned. So, as I just mentioned, the process is dictated by state law. You have your 2 initial hearings to get initial input. Then we have at least 2 hearings on these draft maps. Tonight's the first of those. Then the way this flows in is a little unusual because of the time in the decade where we are. So this map will have a complete map of 4 districts, one of which, given your election cycle, will hold an election. District 4 will hold an election in 2020. But then the 2020 census data comes out in 2021, and the council has to adjust the lines to reflect the new census data. It's usually only an adjustment period, But it is worth noting that one of the districts is adopted in this process will hold an election in 2020. The other three will be at least slightly adjusted prior to actually holding an election, because their first election will be 2022. And that's not city specific. That's true of everyone that's going through this process right now. In terms of the districting criteria and how we're drawing the lines, there are requirements. We have to comply with the federal laws. So we have to have an equal population in each district. We have to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act, and you can actually go too far on the voting rights front. What the court says is race cannot be the predominant factor. It can be a consideration, but not the predominant consideration. Those are your requirements. Where the decisions come down is choosing the map that best respects communities of interest, tries to be compact and contiguous and follow visible features so it's easy for the voters to understand. To the degree possible, we try to avoid putting council members together so that the voters get to decide which council members have earned re-election, rather than our lines telling the voters it doesn't matter what you think, you're going to lose somebody. And then I marked plan future growth in italics because, as I mentioned, this map will only be used for one election, so we're not really looking at growth. But in 2021, when you come back and revisit the lines, you can consider the growth you expect over the course of that decade and take that into consideration then.
Or no growth at all.
That's true.
Or shrinking, which has been our history.
Yeah.
Can I clarify one
Sure.
thing you just said? Are these districts set up by numbers of citizens or number of voters?
Actually, number of people, human
People,
beings.
so it's citizens.
No.
No.
Human beings.
Human beings,
Human
okay.
beings, persons.
All right.
Yeah.
Persons.
I mean,
Okay.
they might be.
Yeah. Oh, and actually that brings up the note I had at the bottom that I forgot to mention. So, and it's actually based on your 2010, it's your latest decennial census count. So your 2010 count divided by 4 works out to 1,865 people. So they are pretty small. This is a small jurisdiction. Certainly not the smallest we've worked with, but these will be pretty small districts. So it is 1,865 people as counted by the census. In terms of the Voting Rights Act, what we look for there is simply, is there a neighborhood that is heavily what the law calls a protected class? Here, the only protected class with any numbers that would impact a district are Latinos. So you have a small concentration in the middle of the city, certainly not anywhere near enough to be a majority Latino district or anything like that, but really just the area where you see in lighter blue and green, we want to avoid dividing that neighborhood up. It's not very much in that way. The red is actually you can see on the west end of town, the red census block that's over 75% Latino. That is very Latino, but there's only 7 people there. So it's not going to impact the demographics of a district, as opposed to the about 400 in the middle there. So as long as we don't divide up that area, we're fine in terms of the Voting Rights Act. So looking at all those criteria, we came up with 2 draft maps. Just very briefly, what we're looking at is that, as I mentioned, not dividing up those 3 census blocks that were highlighted on the last map, kind of keeping that central neighborhood together. And then looking at, obviously, Ojai Avenue is a major road in the city that makes sense to look at. And in both these maps, you'll see that central District 3 goes up to Grand Avenue, relatively large road that goes mostly through the city. And then after that, we're trying to get the population numbers right. And this is the challenge in a small jurisdiction, is that you only get 1,800 people per district, and you have a whole bunch of census blocks, or small geographic units, that have 200 people each. And so we really can't move those because they're 20% of a district, or moving one of those has a huge impact elsewhere. So you'll see there's not a lot of difference between the 2 maps. Essentially you get a northwestern seat, a northeastern seat, a central seat, and a southern seat. So this is 101. And I'll go through these briefly and happy to come back to them and look at more detail. And this is 102. Generally, they're similar. This map does bring 3 south of Ojai Avenue a little bit. The trick is, let me see if this works. There we go. Cool feature. Thanks to your tech team for telling me how to do this. So it brings it down a little bit. The reason it doesn't come down more is the census blocks I mentioned. These 2 little census blocks can be moved. The next piece is this whole region. So that whole thing would have to move. What happens is the census doesn't like cul-de-sacs. It wants a street that it can use as a border for the census blocks, and there are no through streets down there. Everything's a cul-de-sac. And so that whole area just gets lumped into one giant block that we can't split without messing up your population numbers. So that's why there's that funny looking bump. It's taking what we can from that neighborhood and putting it with the central seat. So looking for guidance, as is noted, the districts do try to correspond with the council member in them in terms of the election sequencing. But of course, you just had an election, and one of the problems with these two maps is that these were looking at the council before we knew the election results when we were drafting them. And instead of having one council member per district now, there are your newly elected council member and one other council member in District 3 and no one in District 1. So when the city attorney mentioned we're anticipating some changes, that would be the logical change to make, is to adjust them.
If I could, just to be clear, Mayor, in other words, the public needs to understand that neither of these maps will be presented for adoption, because there'll be new maps with the predicted or probable swearing in of Ryan Blatz as next council person to take, the fifth seat. So just neither of these two maps are going to be presented for adoption. There'll be adjustments, so these need to be looked at more in terms of the principles being involved, not the details. Is that correct?
Precisely.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. The one thing I would encourage too is on the city's website is a link to an interactive map. As you can tell, it's hard to see the details on these 8.5 by 11, even if you print them out. There is a link right on, if you go to the districting item on the home page, it takes you right to the link. Then you can zoom in and out. You can change the satellite image. You can pull up an open streets map which has business names and all kinds of stuff like that. So really, to get into the details of these maps or the maps that will come out in just a couple days that are revised, we do recommend the interactive map.
And if I could just note for those, just to reiterate the point, that link is available on the city's website. There's if you go to ohiocity.org, the front page, in the current topics, there's a link to the page on Voting Rights Act issues, which has a link to that link. And if you have any questions, give the city clerk, Deputy City Clerk Gail Davis, a call, and she'll direct you to that information. So it's available on the website and will be updated. Thank you.
And just a final note in terms of the demographics of these districts on the website and available and actually printed out, we have the demographics of each of the districts in each map. What we're really looking at is the city as a whole is about 13% Latino eligible voters, the citizens of voting age data we get. And it's possible to draw that Central District 3 in both versions comes out to about 23%. So we're not anywhere remotely close to being able to get a majority Latino seat or anything like that, but it does make that one seat slightly more in terms of eligible voters. In terms of registered voters, which we also have estimates of from the state, it actually essentially is no change. The city as a whole is 11%, and that central seat is about 13%. So this isn't something driven by an at-large election system that's actually blocking anyone from getting elected in the history. It's not going to make huge changes in the demographics. It's really just avoiding the multi-million-dollar lawsuits.
And Mayor Johnston, just notice to the public, your third bullet on that slide may be changed.
Correct.
To December 11th.
Thank you, yes. Yeah, we put this together before the date change.
Right.
So thank you.
Okay, thank you,
That's
Bill.
my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions now or after the
Okay.
hearing.
Does anyone have questions?
I just
Paul?
have one question, and I think it's Mr. Summers. The risk that we faced for not going to this district is clear, that it's a violation of the Voters Act. But what risk do we have if they say that the redistricting that we approve is not accurate, not correct?
It is possible that someone could contend that the maps as drawn don't meet the criteria for the state and federal Voting Rights Act. We're confident the maps can be drawn that would meet those criteria, as noted, taking into account communities of interest and taking into account race, but not setting race as a predominant factor. The risk would be a challenge to the maps themselves. That in other cities that have made the switch within the safe harbor has not been a common occurrence. Most of the lawsuits that have occurred in which cities have challenged the idea of districting. The exception has been a couple of larger cities where the ACLU or the Mexican American Legal Defense Foundation or a group called Fair Vote have gone after districting in larger cities. We haven't seen that at the smaller cities. But that would be the risk, is that a person would contend that the maps don't meet the federal or state criteria.
So even though we're protecting ourselves at the initial stage by, if ultimately we decide to go to districting, there's still a risk that we have that they could challenge the fact that we didn't district properly. Okay.
That is correct. There's no, unfortunately, no risk-free approach.
Okay, but we do have, experts advising us so that we'll do the best we can, right?
Correct, yes. Myself and Mr. Johnson will both review the maps in detail and assess them against the state and federal criteria to be confident that any of the maps we present to you, these drafts and the revised ones, in our best opinion, are compliant with the state and federal criteria.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
Just a comment for the public, if anyone is following this and they're thinking to themselves that it doesn't make sense, just be assured you're correct. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, but thank you, Mr. Johnson. Now, are we ready to open the hearing, Matt?
Yes.
Okay, so public hearing is now open, and I have only one card.
Want me to waste another card?
Oh, yeah, put it on, yeah. Okay,
Is that you?
yeah, this is Elise. Yeah,
It's you.
well, no, you'll have company, they just don't all get their cards in early enough.
Elise DuPoit from Ojai. My first comment is I'm really shocked at the lack of interest by the residents of this city in this important issue. Secondly, I wanted to know what happened with the idea of obtaining a 3-month postponement. And also the idea that was presented last time about having a special hearing, not at a regular council meeting, but I want to know what happened to that idea. And lastly, I think it's very odd to stick that little bit up in District 4 just so Sousa could be in District 4, because naturally her district would not, where she lives would be in the downtown. It wouldn't, you know how that District 4 shoots up a couple blocks just so she could be in District 4. That's, to me, where she lives, that's not her natural, where her natural district should be. It would be in the people who live in the downtown core. Thank you.
Okay, we'll try to get answers for those three
Say
questions.
We can answer some of those.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Do what?
We can answer
Do you
some
want,
of those.
perhaps we'll take the full comment and then answer the question?
Okay.
Right, that'd
good,
be good.
okay.
If you've got the questions down. Fight on.
I'm gonna bring a card that's recyclable. We don't keep messing them up. One thing I haven't heard is, when do we have to implement this if we don't get legal challenges? And again, I don't need to know, but I haven't heard somebody say that we have to do this in 2 years, we have to do it the next election, we got to do it in 90 days. And so please don't leave important aspects out that give us that information, because I don't know when we have to do it. We just had an election. So do we need to divvy everything up right away? Is there 90 days?
yeah.
And again, make sure that we know that.
Okay.
I'll have one of my reporters of the Publisher call somebody, so we can report that to the people, because it's pretty important. They're hearing a little bit. They think it's happening. I think they're pretty much resolved, if they're watching this, that it is going to happen, that we're going to pay the extortion, and that we're going to kind of look at the maps and adopt it. And I think that's pretty important.
Okay.
Other than that, and I guess, are we still scheduled for a Saturday?
We will. That's coming up next. But the answer to, so we have, 4 questions? I think the answer to your question is yes, it is the next election. And then, as Mr. Johnson was pointing out, that because of the the census year, we in 2021 will do it again.
Do it.
Or we'll at least revise what we've got. So, is there any other cards, or you need one of those recycled cards too, like Mr. Daddy? Okay, come on up. We know who you are.
Co-card.
Hi, Bill Miley. So what happens in the future if we have district offices like is being proposed, and no one wants to run? So, and it's maybe Mr. Summers needs to answer this. Is it possible then that 4 members of the council can appoint somebody as an interim council member?
I'll wait till all the questions and then I'll answer.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for the question, Bill. Okay, is there anybody else that either? Oh.
It's more of a question. I'm Dale Hanson. I live in the city. So if, once these are divided up, wherever the council member lives, that person can't move. I mean, unless he moves within the district. You couldn't move, you can't just move anywhere you want to in the city. That's not correct? That's good to hear. Okay, thank
We'll
you.
put that on the list of questions. Good question. Thank you, Dale. Yeah. Part of the absurdity of this in such a tiny area, but it may be our fate. Okay, is there anybody else that intended to put a card in on this public hearing? Because if not, I'm going to close the hearing and we'll answer the questions and then take some deliberation, I guess. Okay, hearing is closed.
Mayor, could I interject one thing?
Yeah, sure.
Real quick?
Yeah.
The fact that we hired your agency, NDC, so that the public knows that none of us as council people had any contact with this individual or their company regarding any of the decisions that they made. I believe they made them clearly based on the information that you provided today, which is a consensus, and I think it's in the front of his package. Just so it kind of answers, how did Sousa's little box, we all looked at that too and said, that's kind of weird. But they had to do what they had to do, but fortunately, we had no discussion, we had no say, we had no interaction with this gentleman regarding what he did or what he's
This is
providing us.
just the starting point, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Yes.
Give it, an educated starting point. Okay, Matt, would you answer?
Happy to. So, correct me if I miss any. On the extension, we have sent a request to Mr. Schenkman for additional time, as allowed by a new state law that takes effect January 1st. As of today, I have not heard back yet. I'm not anticipating a positive response, but it's possible. And I will update the council and the public if that changes. We also understood from Camarillo that they have not received an extension in the way that we had thought that they had might. Camarillo did, though, receive a brief extension for the earlier stage, the stage to adopt a resolution of intention, which they are still considering, but they weren't. They were earlier in the process than we are.
And they've gone outside the safe harbor.
That's my understanding. Although I think they contend that they're still within the spirit of the safe harbor. The second question is a Saturday workshop. The council and staff recommend, council has done, to advance the originally scheduled hearing for January 8th, advance that to December 11th, ensuring broader opportunities for public input. At that hearing on December 11th, the council will, I think, in part assess the number of the public participation at that hearing and then assess the idea of a Saturday hearing from there. The which election question is as noted on the slides. This would be, to stay within the safe harbor, must be adopted by January 14th, and then it would take effect immediately, but would take impact or take a real effect at the next election in November of 2020. Nothing at all in this election that just occurred is on the table to be adjusted. That is not within the power of this council nor court at this point. The election results that just occurred would stand, and then the first district-based election would be, under the present maps as proposed, the 2020 election for District 4, presently the District of Council Member Francina, who is up in 2020. And then redistricting would occur after the 2020 census results are available in 2021, ahead of the election in 2022, at which 3 seats in the council would be up, the same 3 that were up this time. It's worth pointing out that the voters' clear decision to retain the directly elected mayor at a 2-year term is respected. The Voting Rights Act does allow for elected at-large mayors, and that will continue with a 2-year term as directed by the voters. If no candidate runs in a given district, as has happened in at least one city, then, and is not uncommon even in at-large cities at times, then the council has the right to appoint to that vacancy. In many cases, if an incumbent doesn't run, as we saw this year, the filing period is extended by 5 more days, and in that time, it is common that people come and run. But if in the end, no one runs in a district, then the council has the power to appoint within some rules and regulations or call a special election. Either case, the person appointed or elected specially must live in the district. The council members who, if we shift to districts, council members must live in the district from which they run or for which they run, and if they move, they must move within the district. The same as is true now, if a council member moves, they have to stay within the city. If a council member moves outside the city, then they must, moving outside the city resigns their seat. I think that was all the questions, unless I missed one.
I just had 2 questions, Matt. If no one runs within a district and no one within that district wants to be on the council, does the council just sit with 4 individuals, 4 members?
If the council couldn't find, someone who they wish to appoint, the default is the special election filing period would then trigger. If no one filed, then it is possible to get stuck in a cycle and you'd be stuck with 4. But I would expect at some point someone could be found
Just
to run.
curious. Then the other question, after the 2020 election, and Sousa's the only one that would be up for that election.
No, the mayor would also.
And the mayor as well.
He doesn't not be affected by the district. You would have 3 council members representing the city at large, and 1 that would only be representing the district, correct?
That is correct. But it's worth pointing out that it's, and this is perhaps more political than legal, elected from districts, still they are elected to represent the city as a whole. Much the same as members of Congress are elected from a district but represent the state as a whole. The expectation from the voters may be that the members of the council would represent the entire city. But you are correct. In that transition period, there will be 3 members on the council elected by the entire city and 1 member on the council elected from a district.
Thank you.
Yes, I have an interesting question. So I'm the only incumbent that's up in 2020. Now, what if I decide to run for mayor? Because then I would not need, do we still need someone to run from my district for city council?
Because mayor and council are incompatible offices, one cannot hold both. You would have to pick which one to run for. Mm-hmm. If you ran for mayor, then there would be no incumbent in your seat in the council, which means the filing period would be extended and anyone would be able to run, anyone who's a registered voter over 18 who's a resident of Ojai would be able to run for, and a U.S. citizen, would be able to run for the seat.
Sounds good.
As long as they lived in the district.
And as long as they lived in the district, yes.
But then the whole valley, everyone has to vote for mayor.
Yes, so that's a point worth making. If the switch is made to districts, at each election, the residents will all vote for mayor. And if your district is up, then you vote for the candidates in your district. So what the present maps is proposed in the 2020 election, everyone in the city will vote for mayor, and only those in District 4 would vote for council. And then at the next election in 2022, everyone would vote for mayor, and only those in Districts 1, 2, and 3 would vote for council.
Mayor Johnson.
And
Go
just
ahead.
a second, okay. And is there anything we could be doing in between now and then and the decision on this to try to rebalance it so that we have 2 run and then 2 run for the?
Yes, the council has the right under a particular provision of the government code to do a one-time 2-year term out of the 3 seats that would be up in 2022, which would accomplish rebalancing come 2024. That can be done by a council vote. You don't have to ask the voters to do that. You simply put it on the ballot as 2 full terms and one-time 2-year term.
Okay.
That is within your option set.
And what is it, like the third?
It can be structured 2 ways. One is you identify specific seats to run for, 2 full-term seats and a separate 2-year seat, or, as is often easier for the Republican candidates, you provide that the third highest vote getter receives a 2-year term.
Well, although
Okay, but in this-
that's true
Yeah,
for at
but
large.
not
but
by
now you'll be
district, yeah.
so
Not by
they'll
district,
they'll
they would have
to
to
choose
choose.
one district.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
That's right, so
Oh,
with
you're
that
right.
option
Thank
is,
you.
that option is off the table now.
Okay.
We can still do the switch, but you can't
Can't do it that way.
Not the third highest vote getter.
No.
What you're left with is pick one of the three
You have
districts
to have a
have a two-year
majority
term.
vote to decide which of the districts would be for a 2-year.
Okay.
And
Bill,
the
you-
council would have to make that
Right.
decision.
Okay, Bill, do you have a comment you want to
Yeah,
make?
I just wanted to comment, let the public and the council know my state of mind on this situation. And Councilperson Francina, yeah, you captured, it, and everybody pretty much agrees with it. It's an absurd situation in a small city. However, it's an absurd situation that's promulgated by the actions of the legislature and the courts, over which we really have no way of challenging at this point without it becoming a quixotic endeavor that wastes the taxpayers' money. I'm not saying much about these maps because, as I pointed out earlier, these won't be any maps that will be presented for adoption. It'll be, we'll have to see with the maps that start talking about are going to be the ones after these results of this election are certified, which should happen by December 3, I believe, in time for new maps to be put out and be considered for December 11th. The point I wanted to make is that there has been a lot of money spent by taxpayers in other jurisdictions challenging the entire situation. We have been well briefed by the city attorney about what's been going on in terms of these other jurisdictions in terms of their litigation. The latest being Santa Monica, which my read of their briefs and their position is pretty much every argument that we could make, they've already made. And they made it to a court, and the court has a preliminary judgment. We're waiting for not a preliminary, they have a judgment, and we're waiting for the reasoning on that judgment. They basically went with the plaintiffs, and the plaintiff's argument, we don't know if the court agrees with the plaintiff argument, but the plaintiff argument was that as long as you can show that there might be some difference in outcome with districting, you got to go with it. That's at least the plaintiff's argument that was made in Santa Monica that prevailed. Whether or not that's the reason in the court, we don't know. So we are carefully looking at the litigation in other cities. If there's either a legislative remedy for, let's say, a carve-out for small cities, or of which us and other small cities are talking to our legislative representatives about, or if there is some kind of change in terms of it goes to the appeals court or it goes to the Supreme Court, then anything that we do here under the safe harbor, and we're doing it in good faith, but under the safe harbor provision, can be changed before the 2020 election. So what we're trying to do is just to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars while we watch the changing legislative and legal environment. I just want to make sure my state of mind is clear. I don't like this, but we shouldn't waste the taxpayers' money in quixotic endeavors. So
Okay.
that's my...
Thank you, Bill. I think you speak probably for the entire council and many in the audience. We will do what we can or have to do. Are there any other questions for Doug? Anything you want to add?
Let me just, in case you get questions about why we didn't have revised maps, another odd provision of this very odd process law is that the maps for tonight had to be posted 7 days ago.
Right.
So we had to draw them long before it was clear what the election results will be. So that's why we're still showing the maps, even though we know there's an issue with both of them.
Okay. And then in the course of the next hearing with public input, we might, probably around the edges, but we might make some other modification if possible. There are not a lot of choices, I know. So, okay.
Final comment is that we will have the revised maps published on the website well ahead of the December 11th meeting, and certainly within the 7-day requirement. The council will be given the option at the December 11th meeting to adopt one of the maps presented. The council could also make changes, and if the council makes changes, then you can adopt them at January 8th, or you can make another choice. And the members of the public should keep an eye on the city's website, because that will have the link to the updated maps on Mr. Johnson's company's website. And the city clerk's office is available for any further questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Matt, do you want to touch on the final date that this is due, and then respond to the question about the public meeting, so that we're going to, if you want to respond.
Yeah, so the deadline within the safe harbor is January 14th of 2019. The December 11th meeting is well within the deadline. The January...
What's the council meeting in January?
January 8th. So that's unfortunately not 7 days before the deadline. So if the council wanted, would not be able to make changes at the January 8th meeting. If the council wished to schedule a further Saturday or some other date that isn't a Tuesday session, I would recommend doing that at least 7 days before the January 8th meeting,
Right.
allowing changes made at that session to then be published ahead of the January 8th meeting.
So if there's gonna be a public meeting, I just want the folks to know what the timetable is.
New
It'll
Year's
be-
Day.
it'll be
New Year's
7
Day. January 1.
It'll be,
7 days.
yeah, but let's not confuse it. It'll be 7 days before January 8th, correct?
That
And
would,
we have to have a public meeting.
unless the council
If we
willing to-
choose to hold a public meeting, or we make the decision December 11th, is what I'm hearing.
that's another option as well.
Right.
And the timing could be set. One, for example, you could even look at a Saturday hearing on Saturday, January 5th, followed by a special meeting on Monday, January 14th, which is the last day, would be another option set. And the council, if you're comfortable and the public is comfortable, albeit perhaps unhappy, make the decision on December 11th would be within your power, or else at that meeting set a further timetable.
And for the public's benefit, the fact that we're in December and we're into the Christmas season, that adds into the difficulty in trying to get all this scheduled in a timely manner, and also to have enough public input. So we're hoping that if you don't quite understand the process or what's taking place, that you come to the next council session and voice your concern that you would like to have a more public hearing and the opportunity to hear more from NDC, and so that we really understand the complexities of this issue. So,
Okay, and this is all assuming that the plaintiff, I guess that's what would call him if it went to court.
Pre-litigation.
Yeah, the Grinch does not decide to give us the extra time
Right.
that
If
we
we
have
can
requested.
secure extra time, then
It would-
that buys
yeah,
us
it
additional time to have
Would be easier
more
on
hearings.
everybody, but, okay, we'll see.
And we'll report back to the council as soon as we hear, and we'll reiterate the request as well, if we don't hear quickly.
Okay, so where does that leave us now for this evening? What, do we need any?
We've had the public hearing, it's been closed, we've had the input, we have our direction
Okay,
with respect to us, the item is
and thank you very much for all your work and for being here this evening.
Thank you, and I'll
Okay.
see you on the 11th.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, we are now on item number 3, and Kat, this I think is yours. Do we have any cards, or is that, okay? The staff can make their presentation, and then we'll open it up.
I'll keep it very brief. Again, I had brought this matter to council the last meeting because of the timeliness of the request. We had already closed past the period from when we were taking waiver request for the Libby Bowl season, but because of the nature of the event and the remembrance of the Thomas Fire, I asked council the last meeting if they wanted to take this up, and the council agreed to do that. So before you, we do have a recommendation to approve their fee waiver request. They are looking to do a one-year remembrance event for the Thomas Fire at Libby Bowl. The total amount of fees that we're asking to be waived is $700. That would be revenue that would have been coming into the general fund. And I know that the organizer is here this evening. If you would have any questions of them, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from staff.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody like to comment, or do you want the council to to deal with it? It's up to. Okay, does anyone have any questions of
Hopefully to say thank you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, do I have a motion, or?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the Libby Bowl fee waiver request for the Thomas Fire one-year remembrance event.
second?
Okay. Moved and seconded by the Bobbsey twins. Oh, pardon me.
Ooh.
He
We
was faster
didn't
than
agree
you
to- we
were.
didn't
You
agree
tried,
tonight,
You
Mayor.
tried.
I
yeah,
tried,
did.
I wasn't gonna speak over him.
I may recognize Randy as the maker of the motion and Bill as the
That'd be
second.
fine.
But yeah.
I withdraw my motion if you want to do it that way.
Okay, either way. Okay, is there any, we have a motion and a second? I don't know, do we need, it's for money, so I guess we have to have a roll call.
Right.
Councilmember Wyrick?
Yes.
Councilmember Francina?
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz?
Yes.
Councilmember Haney?
Yes.
Mayor Johnston?
Yes. Great.
Sorry you had to wait so long.
No, it's okay. On behalf of all of us that have lost our homes, we really appreciate this.
Kat, is this your contact number, 714?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
All right, I just wanted to know.
And thanks to everybody who helped organize.
a lot of people, so
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
A lot of
Looking
moving
forward to
parts.
it.
Hopefully we'll see you on Saturday.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are now on item number 4, and that is the extension of an agreement to the Building and Safety Services with Charles Abbott and Associates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So before you is a request to extend the agreement with Charles Abbott Associates, who are currently providing building safety services to the city of Ojai. They're also providing our contract code enforcement services. They have been serving the city since September 1st, 2016. The current agreement expires at the end of this year. We are recommending that the council consider a 2-year extension to the agreement, pretty much keeping all the same terms and stipulations as is in the current agreement with the city. Also have a couple of options for the council. If council want to consider, we could go forward with just a 1-year extension to the agreement. That works for staff's purposes. That also works for Charles Abbott. They need at least know at least 1 year ahead of time so that they can make sure that they have adequate staffing and can secure the necessary personnel. But again, they could move forward with just a 1-year extension. And then the other options for council to consider, if there was desire to look further at perhaps trying to bring some or all of these services back to in-house not through contract staff, but actually through permanent staff. That's another option if council wants staff to look at that. If so, we would need some time to do that analysis, and would recommend also a 1-year extension. But if so desired, you could also direct staff, and we could do that analysis and bring that back as part of the fiscal year 1920 budget to consider again if we wanted to bring all or some of those services in-house. Provided in the staff report a summary of the expenses, the activity, the code compliance report through October 31st of this year. It also lists all the details and the scope of work. Again, nothing changing there from the current scope of work with the city. Also wanted to note that Greg Robinson with Charles Abbott Associates is here this evening, as well as Tom Juswiak are currently assigned a building official. I just wanted to state that for the record, I've found working with Charles Abbott to be very rewarding. They are very responsive. They have really worked with us very well in terms of embracing whatever directions and goals and needed improvements or changes. Again, we had reached out to them more than a year ago when we had a need to increase the counter hours and increase that presence, and they were able to step up and do that. We've also, I think, benefited from having now some consistent contract code enforcement staff, so we've been able to develop, and I think are developing even further, and a really more robust and consistent code enforcement program for the city. So again, I found them to be very flexible and good to work with. The other benefit of working with a firm like Charles Abbott, this is the nice side of having contract staff. If you have interruptions, whether it's illness or whatnot, they have qualified, trained staff that they're able to bring in at literally a moment's notice if we need to fill a vacancy for a temporary period of time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions of staff? Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Johnston. 3 questions. So the current contract expires December 31st?
Correct.
All right, number 1. Is there a particular reason the actual agreement that we're being asked to extend is not in the packet?
No, we could include that. Really, the first part of the contract language is pretty much the boilerplate. The proposal would be attached as the scope of work, so that would really be the meat of the contract. Be happy to provide that contract to the city.
I'm always uncomfortable.
Okay.
I've expressed this before. I'm always uncomfortable when the actual instrument we're being asked to extend is not, in the packet. And the other thing, just a question, we're in question, not deliberation, is who is managing the online permitting system, the Acela system? Who is the point? Are they responsible for that? Or who is the primary responsible party for managing that?
Well, that'd be a question I would need to direct to Mr. Vega or perhaps to Mr. Juswiak could answer that question.
So all the permitting, excuse me, I'm a little cold. All the permitting is conducted through city staff, and we do our plan checks. We help issue permits, but the actual permits are issued by city staff, the permit techs.
Who's responsible for the online access to our permitting portal that we recently implemented?
That would be city staff.
So who on city staff is the responsible party for
Well,
that?
that's a question of the city manager.
That's what I'm asking the city manager.
So Mr. Vega has been overseeing that.
I asked the city manager.
Okay.
Yeah, so we manage the online access portion of the portal, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, excuse me,
Randy?
can you clarify, James, can you clarify we?
Yes.
There's an actual person that's actually doing it.
So myself and Cheryl Davis have been the two key people on it. We work with Excella, an Excella representative to, whenever there's an issue, we get in contact with them, we correct the issue.
Okay.
Okay, other questions of staff? Do we have any cards? Okay, no cards, well, what's the council's pleasure?
Well,
Go ahead.
were you wanting to wait to vote on this till we see the
Well,
contract?
let me, if you're asking me a question, I'll be happy to respond, but
Yeah.
at the mayor's discretion.
Okay, yeah, Bill, what are you asking?
Well, again, just as a rule, as a matter of course, I'm always uncomfortable when the actual instrument we're asked to extend is not here.
So you're asking for a delay
And I'm
until we
asking,
get-
and there's two reasons. That would be one reason. We do have a meeting well before December 31st on December 11th. The other point is, on December 11th, we expect we'll have a new council member, and this is a 2-year extension request. And I'm more comfortable with, the council that's going to be going forward for the next 2 years be making a decision like this. So, and I also, I am partial more to a 1-year than a 2-year, just because, again, we're going to have some new council people, and there's some issues to discuss. So that would be my preference.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely more inclined to support a 1-year extension also.
Yeah, so I would make a motion to continue to December 11th, when we could see the actual agreement instrument for us that we're approving, along with, that.
Okay, but the representation is that there are no changes, is that correct?
That is correct.
So we've already seen it, is this something that we can trust the staff, that if there are no changes, then we know the document's already in the record? and-
Well, I
and
just
go for a
think
year?
it should be in the packet when we're approving something.
Well, I agree with that. Can we bifurcate that and just give direction to the staff in future that they should include it, or do you feel like there's something in there you need to see?
Well, I don't know. I didn't look at it before the meeting.
Okay.
I just looked at the packet. Anyway, I just feel we should do 1 year if the council's pleasure is to vote tonight. I would prefer to go to December 11th, when we'll have the council going forward in place.
I can go either way.
Okay.
Well, I have
okay.
a couple more questions,
Randy?
Mayor. So, can someone help me with the math on this? I don't know if we need a calculator, but as I look at the numbers here, how are we going to, first of all, Steve, would you have time to put together a package of what it would cost to do this in-house within 2 weeks?
No, we would need a little more time than that.
Okay, so if we need, so technically, we can't make a decision whether to do it in-house or to keep Charles Abbott on. The decision at the next council meeting would be an extension of their current contract only.
That is
And
really
then
the-
we'd have to have the opportunity to give you time to provide that study.
Right, and I really think it's best if it comes back in the context of the budget discussion.
So so when I look at this here, and I look at our fiscal year 16-17, and I look at our fiscal year 17-18, year-to-date on 17-18, I see 326,000 as far as our building code and costs to date, correct?
Correct.
And then I'm seeing the total fees collected to date as of right now at 331,434, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when I go back to 2017, I look at $326,000 and we collected $440,000. So I see $100,014 and $12 coming into the city coffers, utilizing CAA as our permitting entity, correct?
Well, right, and I think, but part of that is you have to note that some of that also includes the amount for the contract code enforcement And
No, I
that's- and
did.
that's-
I took that into consideration.
Okay.
So all I'm trying to say is, utilizing an outside service, the city is generating $114,000. Is that simple math? Am I right on that?
I'm not
Depends on
sure.
what inside services would cost you. You're
I'm
saying,
just
you're
wondering-
saying right now the net is.
Yeah, so the
yeah,
net looks
right.
like it's $114,000,
Yeah.
okay? So then the question is, when you're giving us, when you're gonna bring
Well,
back to us,
The one thing I just have to know is, and maybe we need to break this down a little bit better, because those are calendar year listings and these are fiscal year listings, so they don't exactly track over there, so.
well,
we
that's
can-
not good information for us then,
Well, okay, fair enough.
okay? I mean, how do we compare? So, that's all I'm trying to say, is I'm trying to look at the benefit. And then if you're going to write a job description and we're gonna be looking at an in-house employee, I would think we need to look at the benefit to the community. Is the salary's gonna be $220,000 a year plus benefits, and having them oversee everything that CAA does? And do we substantially make more for the community? I think those are questions that have to come out in any type of process that you're going to.
Well, sure, then of course, the other part of this, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss this when the fee study comes back, because that gets into, our fee recovery ratios and how we collect our fees, because that obviously will also affect the bottom line on this number as well.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're all comfortable with a one-year extension, and some sort of extension is going to be necessary just
Right.
because of the timing.
Correct.
And Bill would like to carry it over to our next meeting in order to be able to take a look at the document, the original document.
Sure, we can include
So
that.
is there any objection to doing that? If not, we can just so order.
And along with that, Mayor, can we also come back at budget session and actually have a
Yeah.
job description and a cost analysis as for that position?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, but we gotta do some kind of extension.
Okay. Okay, so without objection, that will be the order. And we go now to item number 5, the revised banner policy, with a recommendation to direct staff. Did we adopt the banner policy? And if we did,
We gotta
So-
adopt it right now.
We got a double barrel coming in.
So this was the direction from the council was for the Public Works Director to work with the ad hoc committee, your
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Francina, excuse me. And in the staff report, we do have a number of recommended changes to the policy. Mr. Grant, would you like to just very quickly go through those? Thank you.
Step right up there, Mr. Grant.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I thought you actually covered it. I wasn't sure if there was anything else to state there. I didn't know. But I think as the city manager said, the council did request that an ad hoc committee be formed, and we met and discussed the proposed banner policy and did some refinements that are covered in this administrative report presented to the council. I think it's important to mention that it's unlikely that this will have to be implemented. It's really a question if we have multiple applicants shooting for one date, that we're going to actually implement this point system, and we had a few other refinements as well. But in general, most people are getting dates pretty much to what they want. But we'll be, with this implementation of this policy, this revised policy, they'll get the priority date they want. Everybody gets their priority date. Then you get your second priority date if you want it. And then after that, we'll hold open any time slots until 3 months before they're available. And then there'll be a person could even take a third or fourth if they wanted it. We might as well use the banner if it's available. So I think that's the general recap of it. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
okay. And the fees that we're charging, or are we going to revise fees to be sure that what we're doing, we at least break even on? I don't know, we can't make money on things, but we don't want to be losing it. I, for one, other than for the more heritage activities in the city, don't see any need to be promoting hanging a banner across Main Street. I know it's a courtesy to organizations and it can be beneficial to the town, but I would not want to promote that at a loss.
It was looked at when the fee schedule was reviewed about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and it was considered to be fair. It seems like there was no additional cost being added to it, and there was some question as to whether or not the bucket truck is being assessed. I mean, the bucket truck is used for tree pruning, but to a lesser degree now that we have a tree maintenance contract. But I think next time we cycle through the fee assessments, we can try to consider that more because we'll be relying more on the bucket truck for the banner because we won't use it so much for trees anymore. But in general, it covers it.
Yeah.
If you could clarify your response to Mr. Johnson's question, Mayor Johnson's question, he said it was looked at as being fair, which is not really the question. Are we getting full cost recovery?
Yeah, fair is full cost recovery.
We are getting full cost recovery, including direct and indirect costs. In other words, including
That's what
the
our
applied labor costs.
Yeah,
and
that's
the
what our
use of
consultant
equipment.
actually analyzed, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was a year and a half ago, not in this latest thing.
True. I don't
Okay.
think it's changed much in a year and a half.
Okay,
but yeah.
well, my only comment would be is that I would encourage us to do that, just as a matter of the Budget Committee. Susie, you had
Okay.
something?
Greg, it seems like we struck 1 point if located outside the valley. Didn't we strike that?
Yes, we did. And we struck,
Still on page 5.1.
if the organization is from outside the valley, they can still apply, but if the event is outside the valley, they don't get any points.
Well, it says 1 point if located outside the valley. I think that's a mistake.
I think that's the first bullet you're looking at, right?
Yes, at the very bottom. Yeah.
And the first bullet is location of the nonprofit organization.
Shows 1 point if located outside the valley.
Right.
Yeah, I thought we had struck that too.
Well, we struck on the next bullet the location of the event. So if the event is located outside of the valley, we said no points. But there can still be a nonprofit organization having an event in the valley that would still receive a point.
Have we had circumstance like that? I don't know why we want to go outside the valley, or for that matter, even outside the town.
Okay,
I think
see what you're saying.
I can't say off the cuff. I'd have to look at the schedule.
Yeah, they're,
Conservancy?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not outside the valley.
But they're located inside. I think practically every one is located, but isn't the American Heart Association, I think they wouldn't have an office in the valley.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a
so
good
it's
example.
things like
Yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for that clarification.
Uh-huh.
Now I understand.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
So what's the pleasure of the council?
Yeah, move to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, so ordered.
Good job, guys. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. It was really enjoyable working with Greg and Randy. It was great.
Okay, we're on item number 6, City of Ojai Design Guidelines, and that's, oh, Luke.
Yeah, he
Meet
snuck in on
again.
us.
You gotta try to do that. I'd like to hand this out. This is attachment A. It's just at a more legible level.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, we always like color.
I looked at the other one and I didn't know what it was.
We wouldn't either, would we?
This kind of relies, it's still a little
Thanks, Luke.
cluttered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Not getting eye contact. I guess that's what you should do is hand things out then. No, I noticed you're all reading the map. It's a good distraction, I'll keep
Like
in mind.
pictures.
Yeah.
You have any additional crayons?
Never hand out the stuff before the talk.
Yeah, right.
Okay. While
Rule one.
you're taking in the new graphics, I just have a brief staff summary on this again. This staff report and discussion items focusing on the different design guidelines for the downtown core area and Ojai Avenue, which is the Ojai redevelopment area, East Ojai Avenue, Ojai Arcade Plaza, and the design guidelines for the arcade storefronts. The Ojai redevelopment area goes back to 1983. The other three guidelines were adopted in 2001 and 2004. So they all occupy really, again, the frontage of Ojai Avenue, mostly on the east side and the core area of Ojai. And I think one of the key things that the graphic conveys is you have these 4 different design guidelines, many of which include more than one property, which can lead to confusion. Not that the design guidelines are all wildly different or say really different things, but having multiple properties, for instance, the Chevron station on Montgomery and Ojai Avenue is actually subject to 3 of the design guidelines. So that's one issue, obviously, I think with this that the map conveys is that you don't want to have that opportunity for the confusion of if you have inconsistencies, which one would trump which guideline. So that was one issue there, and I know this went to the Planning Commission on July 18th. I was not present at the meeting. And I realize there's some remnants in this staff report that still reads like it's a planning commission staff report, which should not be the case since we're at the city council this evening. But the substance in there is still essentially the same. As we discussed the different design guidelines, pointed out the issue that many of these affect more than one property. And also one interesting issue too is as you get along Ojai Avenue west of Ventura Street, there's no design guidelines that affect those properties along Ojai Avenue. So I think that would be another consideration if there's a decision in the future to reconsider what we want to do with the design guidelines. On the staff report on page 6-4, what it's under council options, it's presenting essentially 3 options on the bullet in the middle of the page, and this is really what went to the Planning Commission as well in terms of what should we do about the situation with the current design guidelines. Should there be new guidelines developed that replace these? Leave the current design guide boundaries as is? Or should we revise the boundaries so that no property is governed by more than one set of appropriate design guidelines? I understand it was the Planning Commission's recommendation to go forward and develop new guidelines, but essentially start with a staff analysis that looks at what's the current state. Again, which properties are covered by multiple guidelines, what's the substance of the guidelines, and essentially how to go forward. I think that does make a lot of sense. I also think, though, these options are not really mutually exclusive. As part of the general plan update and the other zoning code updates that we need to be going through as a city, I think this is key. Design guidelines, after all, are there to implement the general plan. So I would be the first person to agree that the guidelines need to be updated. For me, it's mostly a question of timing. I think today, for instance, we just got our RFQ out for the general plan to start getting requests for qualifications to have those received by the end of January. And we kind of get in a cart before the horse situation where I think the general plan update is really the driver. That I think to start spending time really doing a full-blown analysis, redoing the design guidelines ahead of the general plan, in terms of what the staff recommendation is, I think it needs to get done. I don't think it's a top priority until we get the general plan further down the road. These design guidelines have been in place for some time. They will continue to work. I think if we have situations where a property has an application for development, it's staff's obligation to lay out, if it has more than one guideline, do an analysis, and make a recommendation based on what's on the books. But I don't know that it's a good idea right now to kind of plunge into this and make it a top priority and redo these guidelines at this time. So in terms of when I'm looking at the council options, I think really the third bullet, do we want properties governed by more than one? I think the answer is no. It leads to confusion. You need to determine where those boundaries need to be and set them. So that also leads us to we probably should do new guidelines and simplify it. Certainly having a redevelopment area guideline when redevelopment's been defunct for 6 years, that doesn't make a lot of sense. There may be things in there that are good, but it should certainly be renamed. We may want to look at the boundaries for these things, but again, I think as part of our general plan update, these are exactly the things we're going to be talking about. So I guess to simplify where staff is at on its recommendation is, I think this is something that needs work. It just is a matter of where it falls on the list of community development priorities. And, since this is a tool to implement the general plan, I would say it's something that should be coming after that. So,
Johnson, I have a question for the staff. Please correct me if my perception is inappropriate, or incorrect, but my perception is that the issue of option 3, getting boundaries set that make sense, taking in the issue, in other words, going through looking at the boundaries and getting those rationalized is would be the kind of thing you'd want to set and get in place as part of a general plan update before you even embark on a general plan update. We're talking years before we get that done, and you're talking about confusion, and I guess what I'm trying to understand is I don't understand why we couldn't try to rationalize the boundaries and have that come to council in terms of what makes sense and get that done as part of the work, as a precursor work to the general plan update. Am I missing something here?
No, you're not. It certainly could be done. I'm just saying it really is a matter of timing. Now, if it was to focus on setting the boundaries, to say if the goal is to have no property under more than one guideline, certainly that could be done.
In other words, one of our directions could be for the planning commission to look at just that issue, come back with a proposal for us to approve, and see whether we liked it or not.
And that would be a more focused way of doing it
Be
rather
very
than
focused,
revamping.
and it'd be, and would rationalize things. And plus, it could also deal with the issue of what's missing here, and that's on the west end.
Right, the west of Ventura?
No, yeah, it's nothing there at all.
There's nothing there at all, that's true.
So we could extend one of the boundaries of one of the existing guidelines to that, at least tentatively. I guess that's what I just wanted to throw that thought out there.
And I think that is valid. I guess in saying what I think the staff recommendation is I don't think like kind of the wholesale revamping and analyzing all of it. Yeah, I just don't know that it would be a good use of staff time. But setting the boundaries.
Getting the boundaries rationalized.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest area of confusion. I mean, for instance, when I realized the Shell station is subject to 3 of the 4 guidelines.
Right.
That's,
Paul wants to weigh in here, come on.
Oh, I just wanted to weigh in that what good does it do us to do the boundaries if we don't know what's inside the boundaries?
What do you mean by that?
Well, the boundaries alone don't dictate what the guidelines are.
Well, the guidelines associated with the particular boundaries.
But some of these are governed by 2 or 3.
Yeah, you'd have to decide which.
Right, but that's the full revamp. If
Well-
you're just looking at where the border's going to be, and you
here's-
don't decide what it's going to look like inside the border.
Here's the problem. We're years away from getting the general plan update. We've had this discussion before. We've already had situations where staff just flat out didn't even know what the guidelines were to apply, all kinds of confusion. Applicants are having to deal with all that kind of confusion. So we're talking about years of having confusion. I don't like that.
Right.
Not when we could fix it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Paul.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but I don't think setting the boundaries does that. If we're going to do it, then we have to do it and put the time and the energy and the money into it.
I'm just not sure I agree.
Because what are we going to end up with if we just set the boundaries?
A known, non-confusing set of guidelines for the next few years while we're going through the general plan update.
So you're saying we don't need to revamp any of the guidelines that are existing?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that if you have 3 sets of guidelines on one property, is it that big a problem to pick one?
Yeah, do we have a
Rationalizing the boundaries?
Do we have a hierarchy of needs
No,
or
we
something?
don't.
Yeah, I mean, or could we?
We could.
Well, I
And-
think
and
you
then
could. I mean, like, for instance, when I look at the redevelopment area guidelines are the oldest. They were adopted in '83, and like I said,
And there is no
redevelopment's gone.
redevelopment.
So that kind of begs the question of how valid
So we
are the
could-
purposes
that would
of
be
that.
easy
That's
to
the
get
most
rid of that
dated.
overlap.
I
Just
agree.
get rid of it.
And,
Okay,
and many of the properties subject to 2 are also in the redevelopment area. They're generally in the East Ojai and the redevelopment area.
So,
The arcade is all in the redevelopment area. It's completely encompassed by it. So,
Councilman Blatz, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
so yeah, I think if it's just cleaning up boundaries and not altering the text and rewriting the guidelines, it's a much simpler, focused exercise
That's what I'm
than
suggesting.
embarking on a wholesale change.
Other than the redevelopment agency, you would remove those guidelines?
I wouldn't touch the guidelines now. I might think about renaming them.
Okay.
And take a good look at the properties subject to both redevelopment and East Ojai or arcade in East Ojai that maybe, and again, I want to look at it more, but maybe the arcade in East Ojai would trump the redevelopment guidelines because they're more recent and are probably more on point. But I think it does make us pick. It makes us have to choose.
Right, and
There's
all I'm
one.
saying is that would be the direction I would like to get for council to give planning commission is to take up trying to clean this up without rewriting everything.
Yeah, otherwise it could be, again, a considerable amount of staff time while we've got other things moving
Right,
that
I
could then
agree.
affect this.
That's my feeling.
Okay.
Yep, I agree.
So do we need a motion to direct, or do we have a sense that we've identified? I'm going to have a card in a second. Are there any other questions for Luke? Okay.
Well, and the other thing is that the Historic Preservation Commission has raised the issue of a downtown historic district, which amounts to another guideline, another boundary for guideline. So I assume if that issue would be would be brought up, the appropriate place to start bringing that up would be at the Planning Commission?
Planning Commission at HPC, I think we went in
And
from
HPC
both.
could transmit, but I think that's another issue to deal with in terms of while we're at, but that's not something that we're talking about right now, but it is something down the road in terms of if there are holes in the existing, in other words, it's another approach to establishing guidelines if we wanted to establish an historic district downtown.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Luke, from the standpoint of administering this, sometimes when you have overlapping criteria, you negotiate it out. That certainly is from the standpoint of the applicant. They just want to know what they can do, and then we get within the inside the baseball here between the council, the planning commission, the staff. And I guess the Historic Commission may have different opinions, and they want to say, well, wait a minute, that didn't meet our criteria versus another. I think we had that problem, didn't we, which is what brought this up. But it seems like we're creating a lot of work for something that maybe, I don't know how many of these have, are we trying to prevent this for the next one that comes?
I'll give you one example. We have 2 major properties with more than one set of guidelines on them. We have the World University and we have the Chaparral School property. Those are coming on us pretty quick.
Yeah, okay.
And it'd be good to get them rationalized.
Yeah.
The one advantage, if there is inconsistencies, unlike zoning, they are guidelines.
Right.
So I think if there are inconsistencies, you can explain them and what may make the most sense. But that said, it is cleaner to not have multiple sets of guidelines on the same site.
Okay. Elise, you come on down.
Elise DePoit, Ojai. I won't repeat what Mr. Connolly just presented, but, Councilmember Wyrick, I was going to mention to the council that there has been a proposal to create a historic district downtown, and I believe it is a future agenda item at the HPC. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's obvious that the guidelines need work, as Mr. Connolly said. If you look at the East End guidelines and the Arcade Plaza guidelines, they're over 50 pages long. I'm really concerned about the guidelines for like across the street from the arcade and certain other areas. I don't believe there's enough protection for those areas. And as I pointed out in a letter to Mr. Connolly last week, I'm really concerned, for instance, a precedent is being set for at the Topa Topa Brewery. I don't know if anybody's noticed that the neon lights that are inside the brewery, and I was informed that they did not even need to require a permit for those huge neon signs, and that to me is a real gap in protecting our historic district. And so I have my original letter, and I have some photos that I took, and I only have one copy, so I'll give them to the clerk. But, so I don't know what to do about protecting the downtown core better than it is currently. If they didn't even have to be required to get a permit to have those huge neon lights that shine out into our, it's a precedent-setting situation, and I can only see it escalating, and so I'm concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise.
Can I ask her a question?
Yes, Susan.
Elise,
Elise, yeah.
did you get the response to your email this afternoon?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's basically, they didn't even have to require a permit to have
Yeah.
those big neon signs, apparently. So
There's a number of the members of the public who are very concerned. Yeah. So,
Okay, so what is the council's pleasure?
Well, didn't we kind of have a direction that we asked the planning commission to take up the boundary issue with
Okay,
staff direction?
Okay, and does the staff feel like they understand what that direction is?
We'll double check with Mr. Connolly, but we believe so.
Yes, I think it was clear to take a focused approach to look at the boundaries and to look at getting properties that are now covered by multiple guidelines to reduce that to one.
Right.
Okay,
But no rewriting of the guidelines.
No.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, is there any
No, it's fine.
further comment? Okay, well, then that is the order of the day. Thank you, Luke, appreciate it. Okay, we are
Thank
now,
you for this. Thank you.
now we're down to what, reports?
Yep.
And so let's,
That's fine, yeah.
Paul.
Mr. Mayor, before Councilmember Blatt starts, one comment just for the members of the public to be aware. The issue of the lights inside the brewery at the corner of on Ojai Avenue has been received by staff and is under review. We're looking at it, but we haven't got a definitive answer yet. But it is being looked at, just so people are aware.
And we'll report back to council on that answer.
that's
Thank
one
you.
of the complaints. It's really being looked at. You can't miss it.
Indeed.
You know, and in some ways, it's very attractive. It just may not look like Father Sarah and the Mission Revival or whatever, but that may not be.
You know, it's interesting. I think well, first of all, I went in there just to see what it looked like.
Brave man.
No, I'm just to see what it looked like.
Crowded, more crowded than I want to deal with.
I don't know what time I went in there, but there wasn't a crowd, but it's interesting. I just haven't seen those lights being something that stands out, but I'm not looking at it at that time of day. If they light up that sidewalk in front of the restaurant, I'd be a happy guy. Because that's now that pub or whatever we call it is active, there's a lot more people using that sidewalk.
Right. Yeah, crossing. Okay, Paul, did you have any report? No? Susan, do you have reports from anything?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we follow up. You'll contact, about the Ojai retreat, you'll contact Steve
Yeah, I'll
Bennett.
call Steve Bennett's office. I'm not quite sure. I think what Ulrich was hoping maybe was a formal council action, so we'd have to put that on a future agenda. But I'll look into it and see what I can do. I assume that the Supervisor Bennett's sympathetic to it. I'm not sure why it's taking forever, but.
Yeah, I don't think we asked him if he talked to Supervisor Bennett
Yeah.
directly or not.
Yeah.
That would be really the route to go.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll put the call in on our behalf and say that we would like him to do whatever he can to assist.
I think we're really talking about a vital interest in our sphere of influence
Yeah.
that we're concerned about.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, I know. The community garden this weekend. Where'd I put that? Oh, we're having a big event starting. I got this from Tara Saylor, and this week we're going to have our first workshop this weekend.
okay.
Yeah, this week we launch our workshop series, the first of 3 workshops focused on water. The workshop this weekend is with Connor Jones, and we will be installing a rain catchment system. This is in the Ojai, the garden behind City Hall. And we will be installing a rain catchment system. We will bring the water that is rushing down Ventura Street and routing it into the garden. From there, we will spread it into areas of need. What I love most about this project, this is from Tara Saylor, who's directing the project, is that it will be community built and community monitored. Over the coming months, we will have a place to take people to visually see and understand these systems. Next will be, the second workshop will be rain garden elements. And the timing is perfect because it's going to rain tomorrow. It's wonderful timing. Yeah. In fact, it's supposed to rain 2 or 3 days, isn't it?
Well, let's hope it rains after the catchment process is
jinx it.
installed.
And actually, it might be too wet to do the seminar.
Well,
So,
Connor will figure something out.
you want it to rain Sunday.
Yeah, the rain, the timing of the rain is best after the
after the
installation,
event.
but, okay, so good. I'm glad
Well, yeah,
they're working
maybe
on it.
that's true, that's true.
And can you share with Tara that Tara should be coming in the public comments section and really be
Yeah.
talking up these events rather
Yeah,
than
yeah, I'm
waiting
gonna-
till the very end when no one's here?
Yeah, well, I'm going to help her promote it on Facebook next few days. At least I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. What happened?
You three.
Yeah. That was directed at you, Chad. Yeah.
Nobody's
Okay,
here.
Randy, do you have a report? Okay, Bill, do you have a report?
Yeah, the ad hoc council committee on the, looking at the ordinance revision for the Historic Preservation Commission, the revisions that were looked at again. The committee's finished its work, provided the city attorney has already responded with a review. I responded to his response. I'm not sure if he agreed with all my responses or not.
Didn't see that.
Okay, all right. But anyway, we're very close we're going to go through a presentation to the HPC and then come back to council. So we're on schedule to get that done.
Back in January?
Yeah, that was the schedule, and we'll be well in hand for that.
Great. Okay. I made a brief report. We had a meeting here on the 20th with the retired Fire Chief Roper sort of leading the discussion, and we had people from the Forestry Service and others to launch a strategy that would be valley-wide, not by the city only as a partner. And my feeling is that our part will be doing our job in coordinating with others who are encouraging them to do their jobs in order to what they call harden the community, as well as getting individuals to understand and be educated to how they can harden their individual homes and their responsibility. So that was, the meeting had the discussion, and then we sent out a questionnaire to the various groups that were represented and asked them to give some feedback. Chief Roper wants to get a sense of how much energy and interest is out there, who amongst, not the city, but amongst the valley leaders, the Fire Safety Council, would be willing to step forward. And we've asked that those comments be sent back to us by next week, and in time for us to give something to the council, on the 10th, I guess?
Could I request that you circulate that thread for any of us that might want to put comments in?
Sure, you on the strategy idea?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In
You
fact,
please
Steve,
do
would
that,
you-
because I have some thoughts. I don't want to waste everybody's time with them, but I definitely.
Luis
have
has
some thoughts.
the thing in his computer,
Appreciate
so, okay, that would be great. Randy?
I'm just real quick on the same thought is the CERT program. I've seen Rancho Matilaha use that program extensively. In fact, they almost require it on an annual basis. I know it'd be difficult for us to tell everyone in the community to get CERT certified, but there's got to be a way that we can actually promote it.
Yeah, well, that's going to be part of the strategy,
Okay.
yeah.
I just think it's
Break it
important.
down to neighborhoods and make it a
Right.
voluntary thing, and without specific regard to political boundaries, just the common interest of keeping everybody safe.
Neighborhood Watch.
Yeah,
It's
right.
created the same guy.
Okay.
I'm ready for future agenda items.
Okay, Steve, do you have anything you wanted to report?
Yeah, just very briefly, I want to mention that since we're on the topic of the emergency readiness, the staff is going to be having Emergency Operations Center training this Thursday. We're going to have the Sheriff's Department, Office of Emergency Services, come out and conduct a half-day training. Then we're going to follow that up with the following week with a Emergency Operations Center drill. So we have those two things on tap. Also wanted to announce that we've added a new page to the city website where we're listing all of our requests for proposals or requests for qualifications. So that is a new addition. One of the things that you'll see on there is the general plan update, request for qualifications, and there's a couple other ones that are going to be posted on there as well. So that's a new feature. And just to follow up on the meeting that we had last week, I just wanted to thank the mayor and retired Fire Chief Bob Roper for putting that together. It was a really well-organized and very informative meeting, and I thought brought a lot of good people in the room, and I really thought it was a good discussion to move people in the right direction here. So it was a good start and a good effort. So we certainly understand
What
the
time is the thing
city's
on
role
Thursday
on
that you're going to do? You said there's a Thursday training session?
Yeah, that starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and runs until 2 p.m.
Are we allowed to drop in?
Sure.
Okay.
And that'll be what, here in City Hall, or is it tabletop somewhere, or what?
Now we're doing that one here, or are we doing that one across the street?
So this Thursday the training will occur here, and then we are going to do a brief field trip over to the police station where the EOC is. So the staff that's not familiar with where our emergency operations center is, that'll be there. And then the following week when we do the training, part of the exercise will be to go and set up the EOC so they can see where all the components are kept. And that's where we'll operate out of for the drill. Not sure that it'll be the full 6 hours. Obviously, our EOC was, our Office of Emergency Services was tapped for the last 3 weeks with the different fires in our valley, or in our county rather. So we're going to have an abridged one. It may not be quite the full 6 hours. So if you want to come early,
Right.
come often.
Could I ask Captain Fry a couple of questions while you have the mic?
Sure.
I don't know if there's any confirming evidence of this perception, but just driving around the community, and it seems to me there's, at least my personal observations, is there's more incidents of sort of road rage mentality going on. People getting very frustrated with people going the speed limit. I've observed all kinds of very risky passing maneuvers, because they don't want to wait for the people to drive to the speed limit, they get frustrated. Just all kind of, is there any evidence of that incidence increasing, or is it just my being older?
So I just from my experience, right now, I don't have any official information to share about that, but my experience is much the same as yours, right? There's definitely seems to be a much shorter fuse for people, and it seems to be more prevalent than it used to be. And I think that comes with our roads are congested, and they're not just congested here in the valley, they're congested throughout the whole county.
Okay.
I know I traverse the county every day, right, from CME to here every single day, and I can tell you that the traffic is not getting better, it's getting worse. And I think that people do get a little bit short-fused with it. I was telling the city manager, I stopped a lady the other day driving on Creek Road. She passed across the double yellow lines on a blind curve and almost took me head on.
That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
So she got a ticket for that, and we will continue to enforce the law in that regard.
Yeah. And the other comment I wanted to make, just heartfelt, is that I think the evidence is quite clear now and irrefutable that the sacrifice that your colleague made, his life saved others, probably a considerable number of lives.
No, absolutely. Sergeant Helis is absolutely a hero, did what we're trained to do, and hope that that anybody else that's put in that difficult position acts the same way.
Yeah. May I make a comment going back to the traffic? I posted what was in our weekly update about the sheriff's office obtaining high-frequency whistles to alert wildlife of oncoming police vehicles. I posted that whole paragraph, and people responded very enthusiastically. They wanted to know where to get the whistles.
And I replied to your Facebook page, but I didn't do the whole, or to your post, and I copied the one woman who had specifically asked, but I bought them on Amazon. They were
okay.
a pack of 4, where there's 2 per vehicle. They go on the front end.
I'll go back and look. Thank
you.
you.
So it's on there, and they were, I think it was like $14 for a 4-pack, so it would be 2 vehicles. So they're pretty inexpensive, and I knew about them because my parents lived up in the Sierras, and they had them on their vehicles so they wouldn't hit deer, because not only is it bad for the wildlife, it's bad for your car.
Yeah, people need to really, I mean, 8 deer killed in just a few months is a very significant.
Yeah, there's no doubt that we've seen, to my knowledge, this is the most that I've seen, and these are small deer, right? These are not huge bucks that are being hit, they're small deer. But I just was tired of seeing deer on the side of the road, and figured we could do our part, and maybe people take the lead, and part of that is driving a little slower, paying attention, because especially in the early hours when they're making their crosses, their crossings, that they're not easy to see, and they will freeze, right? That's the old deer in the headlights, right? They stop and they get hit.
Yeah.
Does the sheriff department ever make requests for speed limit adjustments? I mean, that 45-mile-an-hour speed limit on parts of Creek Road is a little high.
No, that's all based on the state guidelines of the percentages, the percentile.
Excuse me.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, there will be a presentation early 2019 by the residents of Creek Road of what they've observed for 3 years, and we've discussed with the people in Steve Bennett's office. They're aware of it. But going back to this post, it was shared multiple times and generated many comments. That's like still among the top 5 complaints in the entire valley is the speed on La Luna. Mm-hmm. There's certain streets, and everybody's asking for, to their way of thinking, the logical thing is speed bumps, but there's some rule that if the speed is too high, that the speed bumps aren't safe.
Yeah, they're hazardous.
Yeah, they're
Yeah, I
hazardous.
agree.
But it's like, it's a contradiction, because why not lower anyway, the whole criteria for looking at the speed limit is being challenged. Is they're looking at it in Sacramento. So
Well, and I think that's where it needs to come from, right? I
Yeah.
know that at one of my coffee with the chiefs, I had an opportunity to talk with a
Yeah.
woman who was talking about the issues on Creek Road, and I said, we will assist the highway patrol in any way we can to help curtail some of that behavior and the speeding that's taking place on there and the reckless driving and the illegal passing that's happening. And then I also reached out to Supervisor Bennett's office and spoke with Steve Offerman as well and made him aware of the complaint that was lodged so that they can look at it from a county perspective and what we can do to make the road safer for sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Steve, did you have anything else before we go to?
No, just future agenda items.
Yeah, okay. And Bill, you said you had something you
Yeah,
wanted?
two things. One is, I need to be reminded, I'd like to be reminded, excuse me, of we had continued the 2020 item from the last agenda. Did we continue that to a time certain?
No, we didn't, and I'm glad you brought that up because it was the comment that was made that there was a desire for more study. So I'm not sure if that was that the individual council members wanted to do more study or if there was a specific request for staff to do more research.
I wasn't making that request. I was just hoping it would come back to us and not get lost in the ether. You know,
Okay.
that it
Well,
could come.
is there some kind,
We're ready to bring it back at any time. The staff report, we can put that back.
but with options
but
and recommendations, or just
I'm
for a
not sure
general
what the-
conversation?
You had options and recommendations.
I wanted to wait till January, because I do want to, I would like to have members of the public that have gone to cities that have the 20 is plenty, because there are people in Ojai who've been to places.
Okay.
And
Could we just have it at one of the meetings in January then?
yeah,
I could
yeah.
do-
Last
I
meeting in
think-
January?
I was going to recommend that because
And
the
then-
first
and the-
meeting's looking pretty busy, so
So let's
sorry.
do last meeting in
Yeah,
January.
And that's around the time the stop sign at Summer and Signal's coming.
Actually, that'd be planning to bring that back at the next meeting.
Oh, good, wonderful.
Actually,
Bob
I haven't
Daniel.
heard any opposition to 2020.
No, but we need to get
We've
it
been talking
before
about
us.
this for a long time.
But that's why I
Yeah.
went on the agenda.
Yeah.
I haven't heard any.
Put it on the
opposition.
agenda.
I had a second thing, real quick.
Yeah, go
okay?
ahead.
And that is, I would like to suggest, we have three strains of the same theme in terms of Title X text amendments. We have the VMU needing to be just changed from the commercial industrial to a special category. We have the allowed use table issue in the M1 and MPD zone. We have the allowed use table for the PL zone and the definition of PL allowed uses. It seems to me that we ought to consolidate all of that into one planning commission agenda item in terms of Title X text amendments, rather than having them be done separately. And I know that this is coming up. You're, I guess, what I've been told in terms of parliamentary procedure is we have to have that on the agenda to direct the planning commission to do that. And I'm just suggesting that if we have to go through that step, that we look at that consolidation when it does come to the council for direction,
Okay.
the planning commission. That's
Yeah,
my
Mr.
thought.
Mayor, I agree in concept with what you're saying, but I do think that one of the speakers tonight with the M1 zone, the caravan location, I think that's something that we need to look at
I agree.
immediately.
That's included.
And if that text amendment has to go back to the planning commission, does it have to come before us to direct it back to the planning commission? Or can it just go back there?
That's what I was hoping, we could just go to the planning commission with it. But does it
So
have to
if-
come back to us as an agenda item before we can direct it to go to PC?
The reason is that it is not presently in the council's previously adopted budget and work plan for the community development department to change the allowed uses in the M1 zone. An applicant has sought that as a change, but they have chosen not to apply for it. Instead, they've sought this process. The council as a whole would have to direct that it be added to the work plan for staff to bring it as a staff-initiated, council-initiated, with no fee, change in the allowed uses in the M1 zone. That's certainly within the possible range, but it unfortunately would take council to direct that happen, and then it would go through the planning commission to look at the zoning change and then back to council.
Mayor, didn't you bring this up? Guys, I'm just lost on this. Why isn't this an action that the city manager would tell his department head to do? Why are we agendizing something like this?
We have a request from an applicant to change the allowed uses in the zone.
All right, well, what I'm
But they
presenting.
haven't formally applied for that.
That's why.
What I'm presenting here is a consolidated look at some issues in Title 10, all fairly small but best handled together. It's not a specific to one applicant request. It's an issue involving issues of several properties. And I guess I'm asking for, why can't the staff go ahead and proceed with that with the Planning Commission on that consolidated basis? I don't get it.
Well, I'm assuming it has to do with priorities and workload.
Do we know that's
So
what-
if the council wishes to give that direction, and I guess what the city attorney's saying, is it's not, I don't think, parliamentary rule, it's the Brown Act rule. It's got to
Correct.
be on an agenda.
All right, so we have to put it on the agenda.
So put it, is that
Okay.
the request? I think that was the request in the,
Mr. Mayor,
And-
are you saying that the applicant could apply for those text amendments on their own?
Yes.
But they want us to look at it so that it can be a blanket, and that affords them the saving of considerable amount of money? Is that what it is?
Yes.
I guess that's one way to put it, right. But staff would be ready to bring something for discussion at the next meeting on this item to be able to move it forward.
I would just ask to look at it as a consolidated, let's wrap
Yeah.
everything into this
Yeah.
Title 10.
Yeah,
agree,
and I think
but-
there's definitely worth in looking at that and considering that. So
Okay.
we'll have that conversation with Mr. Connolly.
Okay.
it's easier said than done, right?
Indeed.
I mean, when we say roll it all together, I mean, I understand why you're saying that, but it's a little bit like me saying we need a general plan update.
Well,
It depends on how big we roll it up.
Yeah, I'm not viewing these as general plan issues. It's just house cleaning, really.
Right, and I'm just saying, yeah, I'm only empathizing with staff. Even though these are what Greg would call just this and just that,
Right.
is this something that in your view can be done and do, or do we need to piecemeal it in order to get the work started? I'm not.
Well, again, I guess it's a little hard for me to answer that question because we really haven't been directed to do all the analysis on it yet. So it's a little premature for staff. I mean, I can't even tell you right now what our recommendation would be because we really haven't been able to go through and do that work. So.
Well, Bill, you went through it rather quickly, and I have to admit,
Yeah, there
I
were
didn't
three
follow
things.
what you said.
One is we've already have on our project list to do the
Yes, we do.
VMU classification adjustment.
Right.
That's
Pretty simple
correct.
thing to do.
Right.
That's already on our list, okay? And all I'm saying in that same kind of category
Okay.
that the VMU adjustment represents, you also could look at as extending it to adjusting the allowed use table for the M1 and MPD zone, and looking at the allowed use table for the PL zone and the definitions of allowed uses in the PL zone. We've all raised those issues, and they're all, one of them is already in the work plan, and I'm just saying, why don't we
Correct.
just consolidate with the thing that's already in the work plan and get this done?
And I think there's some wisdom to that, and I think what the city attorney and I are saying is, we simply need to have that on the agenda and have council give that direction to staff.
So that'll
So
go
we
on the
understand.
next agenda?
You bet,
Yeah,
yes,
okay,
it's
so-
there.
Okay, Mayor?
Okay, so that'll be what, the 10th?
The 11th, right.
December 11th.
Right.
11th, okay, December 11th.
So I have the one simple thing, I think it's simple, is how do we take the community, the ability to tax the recreational and the manufacturing aspects of cannabis? And how do we do that? And when could you come back with something of that nature?
Okay, and city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but that would need to be a tax that the city council would need to put before the voters, and then obviously the voters would need to approve it.
Yes.
I don't know if you could do it outside of a general election?
It depends on the form of the tax.
Okay.
Short answer, it's possible to do it at a special election. Long answer, depends on the exact type of tax. But it can be done at a special election or at the next general election in 2020. But a special election earlier than that is possible.
And much more costly to do if we have to do a special
Right. Well,
election.
yeah, I
So
would
But
do a
the
special-
county of, not that, I'm not disputing what you're saying, but it seems to me that the county of Santa Barbara is ahead of us on this as a county. And if we were to take a look at what they've done and then look at what the potential revenues are in order to decide whether or not that's something we'd wait until 2020 or whether a special election might be in order. The sooner we do it, I think, if we're going to do it, or if the citizens want to do it, then the better off we are. Bill?
Then I just one other thing to add to it. And then is there any way of tapping that money into specific needs of the community? For instance, could we earmark that money, put it into an account and use it for traffic study and parking? Can you do things like that?
Yes, but at that point, you're labeling it as a special tax because the proceeds would be.
That's 2/3.
They are restricted and correct. It would require a 2/3 vote, whereas if it was just a general tax going into the general fund, you would need simple majority.
Right, and if
for
we were
approval.
to have adopt some sort of commitment as a policy thing as part of the campaign to support what we were doing, telling the voters what we have in mind, then it becomes kind of a covenant, not necessarily restrictive by law, but restrictive by, good politics and good conscience. Bill?
Right, many general taxes are adopted with a companion advisory measure that legally isn't binding but politically becomes binding.
I just want to make several comments. One, I want to remind all of us that at one of the candidate forums, this question was asked, and every single one of us, including you, Councilman Hayes, said you weren't interested in raising taxes on cannabis. That was a position that all the candidates took at that forum. Number one. Number two, I'm not sure I agree with the characterization that the county's ahead on this, because if the idea is to try to maximize regulated legal activity, you don't do that by raising taxes on that activity. That actually inhibits moving towards regulated and legalized tested activity. The state is pretty well acknowledged. I remember hearing some presentations from the Bureau of Cannabis Control that they understand the state made a mistake in the level of excise taxes that they are putting on the cannabis industry because it is working at cross purposes to the broader purpose of having legalized, regulated, licensed activity. So what I would want to say is that I maintain my position that this is not a kind of business activity to single out for special taxation unless there really is a very strong need because it works at cross purposes to the public health aspects of getting this activity as much legalized and regulated as possible. That's my position.
Well, it's not on the agenda tonight, so
Right.
we're going into debate, and I appreciate your remarks, Bill. So if you're interested in pursuing that, Randy, you'll work with the city manager and bring a report back as to how we would get to a decision. Okay, is there anything else for the good of the order?
Yes, Mr.
Here, you know me.
My mistake, what?
Yeah. I just want to, I think that we need to change this 8 o'clock thing to time uncertain. Because as you saw,
Time is uncertain even when we do it at the beginning of the meeting, but I understand your comment.
yes.
Yeah.
And we only had we have one public comment. Two.
And this is not a town hall meeting, it's a business meeting.
I beg to differ. I've thought about that long and hard.
Mm-hmm.
Your comment that it's not a town hall meeting. It's a combination business meeting and town hall meeting.
Well,
it is an opportunity for the public to come before us and that's how we often get things on the agenda. We give the public an opportunity.
And they do have that opportunity, and they know generally what time, and if they're delayed 15 minutes, I'm sorry that the other discussion ran on, and I'll work harder to get it at 8 o'clock, unless the council wishes to change the order. I think that, the comment that was made here about it's undemocratic to have a time certain as a convenience to the population and then give them the 3 minutes to say whatever they want to say on any subject, doesn't seem like it's undemocratic, particularly when council meetings, by law, are business meetings. Yeah, they're open business meetings, but nonetheless, it's not meant to just be a jam session. So anyway, we disagree on that, and
Yes, we do.
And,
Yes, we
and
do.
at some point, the council may decide to change that. I don't quite understand why coming at 7 o'clock and waiting until 7:30, whatever, to get up to talk, or having it at 8 o'clock and being able to have your dinner and come down. But
It's
that's
not-
just difference of viewpoint.
It's not the wait, it's just that it disrupts the continuity of the matter at hand. And that's a simple fact. And, and it's also disrespectful. Like, something comes up, and it's also discombobulating for the people that are watching on TV. They might leave the room for a minute and they come back and they wonder what happened to what we were talking about. Suddenly, we're in public comment. And it's just, I don't know, none of the commissions do it. I don't know of any city council that does that.
Oh, there are a number of them that do it. It's
In the
not.
Some of them do it
it's
at
not
the end of their
uncommon.
meeting.
Yeah, a lot of them do it at
Well-
the end of their meeting to discourage discussion, and we've done it at a convenient
right.
time after dinner. And then, so maybe it's 5 minutes off. We've certainly had meetings here where it's been as much as an hour off, doing it at the beginning of the meeting. So,
Well-
anyway, it's a difference of opinion, and we can change it at some point, but so far, I don't see, personally, I don't see that it's been a problem, and we've given everybody ample time to express themselves, and they haven't had to stay here all night, so.
Well, I think one more aspect of it is if it was a major inconvenience to the community, I think they'd be coming here and speaking to it. And I haven't heard one person come here and speak to
There've
it.
been a couple.
No, I've heard one, but that was inside baseball again. It was one of our own.
But did you
That's what I'm
hear
trying to say.
Did you hear what I said about it, how it disrupts the continuity of the subject that we're discussing?
Well, these are your opinions.
Yeah.
Well,
in-
no, it's
in
a
some-
fact. It's a fact.
No,
We're
in
in
some-
the
your
middle of a
opinions.
discussion.
In some instances,
And then we have to change gears.
but we didn't do that tonight, based on your concern last week, or 2 weeks ago. And, it's, there are times when it does, but most of the time, if we would pay attention, if I would pay attention, we would be able to get around that. And if people don't want to sit here and listen to the
But
business.
also, the people that are here for that subject have to wait and sit through the public comment. Well, anyway, that's not how my brain works.
Oh,
Is
okay.
If you're, I'm a writer, and, you don't stop and then just go back and forth. Anyway.
Mayor, the city manager had it.
Steve.
Thank you. Just very quickly wanted to run through the list of the known agenda items for the December 11th meeting. Again, we're anticipating that we'll be certifying the election results from the general election. We'll be seating the new council and also doing the reorganization. That would include the election of Mayor Pro Tem. We'll also be recognizing our outgoing member, assuming it will just be the one
You will
member.
be here. Good.
Also, we'll be having a couple of things we already touched on these, but the request to consider the stop sign at Summer and North Signal, that'll be on the agenda, along with coming back with the discussion on the active transportation program, the ATP, next steps, including consideration of a possible RFP for the consultant design services. But again, multiple steps there for
And
council
that
to
would
discuss.
include design adjustmts?
It would potentially include that as well.
Okay, as
yes,
long as
of
that's on
course.
the agenda.
Sure, well, sure, yeah, because, this would just be, well, we're getting a little too into the discussion, but yeah, I'll talk with you afterwards. And then the discussion that we talked about before about the VMU zoning, the MPD, M1 zoning, and PL zoning, so we'll have that on. Also, the public hearing for the possible district elections. The Charles Abbott contract will be back, and a possible CAL FIRE grant application that Mr. Grant and I are taking a look at, but we have not made a decision on that yet.
Steve, what were you doing for the caravan?
That was.
That's part of the one that we were talking about. We're going to talk about the,
Allowed use
yes.
table. Modifying the allowed use table.
Yeah, we'll have an item come back, and the cannabis as well. Thank you, Matt. So that's what we got for the 11th.
Okay, well, that's a heavy agenda.
It
unless
is.
we look at, there are 3 or 4 things that don't require a whole lot of conversation, that we've already had the conversation.
On consent.
So, yeah, maybe we can,
And then we
okay.
just pull it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
2 comments. First one, I found the 8 o'clock thing fantastic tonight, and it was great. So as a citizen, I found that to work great. Second comment is that, we kind of specifically came this evening to try to avoid being roped into a larger, longer discussion. And I know we've talked to everybody about expediting. You and I have traded a few emails on the outpost topic, but I would just like to say that anything we can do to be avoided in the larger conversation of that topic would be greatly appreciated, and your assistance for a local business would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Are we gonna have a traffic study for the outpost, for the traffic generated by the Outpost Lodge?
If we do have a traffic study for the outpost, I would request that we do that for all of Bryant. One of the earlier things I heard in the meeting was there was no impact on the Bryant Street traffic, and I would strongly disagree with that.
Right. The idea of a traffic study is not for any specific business, it's for us to do our job, which in general, in our general plan, calls for traffic.
Yeah, if there were
That's all we're
something
looking
conducted
for.
like
I agree with
that,
that.
I would support
I
it,
agree
and
with
I would have a couple of locations. And
Yeah.
I think the old adage that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it applies to many, many things on that. So I'd be more than willing to look at the numbers on that and help as part of the decision
No, I agree. It
process.
just felt like,
Okay,
you know,
thank you, Brad.
similar
Okay,
to that.
we're adjourned.
Why do you-